Hi, Mary.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'll be right back.
Hi, Brian.
How's it going?
It's all right. Happy Monday.
Yes, happy Monday. I will be back.
What was that? Okay. Hi, Steve.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
Tom, I'm on.
Hi, Margie, how are you?
Fine, Steve, how are you?
Good, good. We're gonna get started in a little bit, so we'll introduce you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I actually attended a live school committee meeting. I don't know if it was last week. No, it wasn't last week because I was vacation the week before. It's the first time I've done a live school committee meeting in a long time.
Yeah, we're still zooming along here.
Yeah.
Hi, Beth Ann, I miss you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Hanging in there.
Good.
Good evening, everyone. I do not have the mayor just yet, and I haven't received a message. I'm sure that she is on her way. And given that we have, I know some guests today and some folks that have to leave a little bit early, I am just going to move ahead with calling the meeting to order at 7:01 so that we can get started and the mayor can jump in when she's ready. So at this time, I'd love to begin just by taking the attendance. So I'll ask our school committee secretary, Ms. Jensen, to begin to call the roll. And I see the mayor is joining us now.
Folks,
Hi, Mayor. We're just doing attendance.
great.
Do you want me to take the lead on calling roll, or are you ready for that, Mayor Driscoll?
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and call the roll. for our meeting opening. Thanks, Mr. Cruz, for helping out there on February 28th at 7:02 p.m. Calling for attendance for those who are here, Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
and Mayor Driscoll. Yes, all members are present and accounted for. Have you already covered the approval of the agenda, or you're just doing the call to order? Is that correct, Mr. Cruz?
Just the call to order and attendance, Mayor.
Got it. Perfect. So we do have, we are meeting remotely pursuant to legislation that enables us to do that. We are allowing Salem School Committee members, would love to hear from the public, and part of our public participation policies is that we also enable Spanish interpretation to be available. So I'm going to move us through the agenda to approval of the agenda for this evening and entertain a motion. Mr. Fleming.
Approve.
Mr. Fleming moves approval, seconded by Mr. Cruz. All those in favor, Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mayor Driscoll. Yes, 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative. The agenda is approved. I'd entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda this evening. Mr. Cruz,
So moved.
Mr. Fleming,
Seconded.
under discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, Ms. Manning? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Manning, do you have discussion?
Well, I wanted to either remove an item or move it down to the regular. I'm not quite sure. I forget how to do that, to be honest.
Yeah, you just asked that an item be removed to the regular agenda.
Okay, I forget the letter, but it's the item on the ROTC trip.
I see approval of the school committee minutes, and then I see warrants. I don't see, am I missing something on the consent
I
agenda?
don't know, maybe I misread the.
Yeah, I think it's under new, new business,
No,
Mr.
new, okay, sorry.
That's okay. So motion made and
So you're
seconded. to
looking for a
approve.
vote? Yes.
Ms. Manning in favor of the consent agenda. Ms. Manning, yes. Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mayor Driscoll, yes. 7 members voted, 7 in the affirmative. Next sign up, Mr. Cruz.
Mayor Driscoll, I just wanted to note before we dive into other items on the agenda, our student representative, Awa, has joined us today. She did inform myself and Ms. Campbell that she does need to leave within the first 20 minutes of the meeting, and she asked if we could take her student report out of order so that she can provide it and then hop off the meeting.
Sure, that sounds terrific. It's good to have you here, Awa. Is there any objections to taking our student representative report out of order? Seeing none, Awa, why don't I turn it over to you?
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to update and thank you for welcoming me back. So the Student Advisory Council, what we've been working on in the last 2 weeks is we were able to successfully have our retreat last Saturday, which was super, super helpful in terms of focusing on our 2 priority plans, which was the restorative justice circles and implementing that in the district, and then the student rights handbook. And we created action plans for what we want to do with the next steps for the restorative justice circles. So we are going to be planning an assembly that we're hoping is going to be district-wide, where we'll introduce the ideas of what restorative justice circles will directly look like in our schools. And we would use Salem High School as the model, since that's where most of our students are compromised. And we would talk about possibly the training that teachers and staff would need in order to support restorative justice circles. And when we were planning these actions plans, we were trying to think about tangible things that specifically seniors can do before they leave to allow steps for next year to already be established for the next upcoming student representatives and other members of the Student Advisory Council. And then for the Student Rights Handbook, we're working on the first drafts of that right now. So we're trying to collect information that we know that students have that protect them in school in terms of interactions with administration and other staff members. And we're compiling that into a draft, and we're meeting on Friday to look over that. And the next thing that I wanted to discuss is that we have been talking about the mask mandate, since that was a large conversation that we were starting to see brought up, and we felt like relevant to discuss during our Student Advisory Council meetings. And while it felt like most students strongly advocated that they actually were against lifting the mask mandate because they felt like it was and to give detail, most of those students were high school students, but a lot of the advocacy against for lifting the mask mandate has been about like socialization between students. But we felt rather that things that we'd rather see is the slow transition into the removal of like COVID-19 guidelines, like the rows of desks that we have in our lunchroom rather than actual lunch seats. And that's things that we would be more interested in seeing, like that directly, like we think it's important to distinguish between the ways that high schoolers and middle schoolers have been impacted by the pandemic rather than elementary school, which is what has felt like been advocated for when we're talking about the mask mandate and socialization. And we are also looking into student discipline specifically at Salem High right now because of vape detectors. And we're meeting with our assistant principals to learn more about the ways that students are getting searched to better inform us about what we want to do as the next steps, especially because we don't exactly have full transparency on the ways that searches are going at the moment. So that's what we've been working on.
Thank you, Awa. Appreciate those updates. Any questions or comments for Awa? As I want to make sure she gets an opportunity to jump off as soon as she can. Yeah, Dr. Pangallo.
Yeah, could you tell us more about students' preferences during lunch exactly? So you said they don't want to be sitting in rows. So this is inside the cafeteria, I take it?
Yeah, it's just like if you've ever seen like testing room, like when you take the SATs or whatnot, that's like exactly how we're eating right now. So that means that like if you're talking to somebody, you have to like on your desk, but then you also have to turn around. It's very awkward. And of course, like students are moving their desks, but that's clearly like advocated against, and like adults aren't like allowing them to, like they might turn a blind eye, but like technically they're not supposed to. So that's not something that they they can do. So it's like a lot more awkward, and it makes like the lunchroom not want to be a space where people want to eat, which is why people like seek out to eat in the library, which isn't allowed, or like in other spaces where they feel like there's actual tables for them to eat at.
So are people eating outside at all?
Outside was something that was introduced in the beginning of the school year, but because it's gotten so cold so quickly, we haven't been eating outside since I would say November, and that might be stretched too, like it might have been October.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Awa? All right, well, we'll keep moving on the agenda. Good to see you, Awa. Thank you for those updates and for the work you're doing, especially the Student Advisory Council. Sounds like you guys made some good headway at your retreat. All right, next up is presentation of our Honorable Mention Award, the Mass Partnership for the Youth Poster Contest. Steve, can I turn this over to you?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Awa, for your update. I wanted to introduce a couple of guests that we have with us tonight, and I might ask our guests to introduce the award, but we have Margie Daniels, I'm sorry, Executive Director of Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth. I've known Margie for a while, and her organization does some important work in the region and across the state now around supporting schools around mental health, safety, both physical and mental health. And we were really excited to learn that one of our students at Carleton Elementary School was awarded a certificate and give an honorable mention. I'll let Margie describe what it is in a second. And I do want to just acknowledge that we have Carleton Principal Beth Ann Jellison with us here as well. And we do have our student Zoe Zahn. I hope I said that correctly. And I love anybody that has two Z's in their name. I'm instantly a fan of the Z. I knew I would like you immediately, Zoe, when I saw that, but I'm going to turn it over to Marjorie so that she can tell us a little bit more about what this recognition is all about.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here before the Salem School Committee. I thank you so much for graciously welcoming me tonight. Just a few minutes about our organization. We're a small nonprofit. We started in 1988, so we've been around for a while. Our mission is prevention and intervention in matters of health and safety for youth. So I think it was 11 years ago, we started to offer a poster project, giving students a voice to speak about what we considered important issues. And every year we change up what the theme will be. This year, the theme was Peace Brings the World Together. I really want to emphasize what an accomplishment this is. We had 441 posters submitted. That's a lot of posters from across Massachusetts, from just about all counties. And to have an honorable mention when you have that number of posters, I think is really, really phenomenal. So I'm here today to honor Zoe. The poster is awesome. Will you be able to show it? Good. And the judges, and we have a panel of judges that are school superintendents. We have some law enforcement folks. We particularly like to have art teachers. And this year we were very, very fortunate to have 3 art teachers who helped with the judging. And then we always have some people from the mental health world, guidance counselors. We had a school social worker actually from your neighboring town of City of Beverly. And people just loved this poster. They loved the colors. They loved the people standing together, holding hands, and they just thought it was a terrific message. So this got such great enthusiasm from our judges. So I'm here really to say congratulations, not just to the student, but also to the school. So congratulations.
Great work, Zoe. Do you want to offer a few remarks and tell us what your inspiration was for your work?
Do you want to talk about it? Here's, I don't know if you guys could see the poster or not.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, there you go. That's a good picture.
Cool.
How's that? Does that work?
That's neat.
Yay. What's your inspiration, Zoe?
I guess I thought like it's been like a lot of stress on people to like be in quarantine and be alone and not have many people. But as we're getting better, even though we may not be able to see each other in person, like it's still like kind of like an emotional connection that like it's such a strong impact on our lives. The coronavirus and all the things that have been bringing us apart, that like it was just a way to show like that we may not be able to stop the coronavirus, but we can like make our vision on it better if we come together.
Here, Zoe. That's wonderful inspiration and great artwork. This is a fabulous poster. I can see why it was selected.
Thank you.
Anything else, Margie or team, that we wanted to offer for commentary on this?
I'll just throw in a quick shout out to your superintendent. I've had the pleasure of knowing him since his days in Wakefield, which are many moons ago, but he has just, I think, been such an extraordinary school leader. And we had our first, after being shut down, of course, for the better part of 2 years, we had our first live conference in September this year, and it was an attendance summit. And he spoke so eloquently, so beautifully. I just cannot thank him enough for the leadership and friendship that he has shown to our organization. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thanks, Margie.
And Marjorie's my older sister, so.
And I don't even have 2 Z's in my name, but we're still friends.
No, we appreciate those comments. It's not an easy time to be an educator, certainly to be a superintendent, and we're grateful to have him here.
And he was the first call I made when I was looking for a speaker, and he so immediately agreed to help us, which I greatly appreciated. And he brought a member from the State Board of Education to speak with him, and it was phenomenal. It was really one of the best conferences we've ever had.
Fantastic. It's good to know Salem's presence is felt beyond just our community. And
definitely
thankful for the selection, and Zoe, you're definitely making us all proud, both as a district and a community. So thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move us on the agenda. Zoe, you're welcome to stay, but you can also go. Okay. So our next presenter is our student showcase, and we've got Salem Prep High School. I see Mr. Edmonds there. Good to see you. Are you getting any sleep, Mr. Edmonds?
Well, we're getting a little bit. It seems to be sporadic, but I'll take what I can get these days.
You can string together 4 hours. That was always the timeline, right?
Take it. Yeah.
Well, we're excited to hear from you and from your students today.
Yeah, well, this evening, I will not be doing a whole lot of speaking. I have a couple of students that are with me tonight who are fully capable of communicating this message, and really it's their message. This is their student voice project. Through the partnership with the Equity Imperative, we've been working through really analyzing this issue, and the students have really done all the work. So I don't have a whole lot to share with you. I'm going to let them do all the speaking tonight.
All right.
Alexis and Robin, are you guys ready? All right, take it away.
Okay, hello, my name is Alexis Evelyn. Thank you for having me here. I'm a senior at Salem Prep, and I'm here to talk about a subject very important to me and many other children from the prep. I'll be talking tonight, but these ideas and thoughts came from many meetings with all the students at Salem Prep. I have been in the Salem School District for my entire student career, from 3 years old at the Brentley Police School till today at 18.
Okay, first of all, I love you, Alexis. Hi, I'm Robin. I'm Robin. I'm a junior at Salem Prep. We and many other students are extremely concerned about the mental health crisis plaguing adolescents right here in the city we live in. We would like to share some reasons we came up with that we feel contribute to this problem in our district. We feel that it's hard for every child to feel like they belong and are comfortable in school when they don't get all the help that they need. It feels to students like mental illness isn't prioritized enough in schools, which makes sense because historically mental illness wasn't taken seriously, or it wasn't something he talked about, at least. In our society, talking publicly about mental illness isn't comfortable. You don't show what's going on inside. The media portrays people with mental illness in a bad light, causing people dealing with mental health problems to feel like outcasts in their own community.
I felt, along with many other students I've talked to, that staff don't necessarily know how to help kids facing these issues. I believe this is due to lack of training. I know teachers in this district care and want to help. They have not been properly taught about these subjects as much as they should. When I was having mental health issues, I was told to drop the class instead of helping me get back on track. I feel this was mainly because mental health education is not valued, funded, or resourced for mainstream educators. I feel that many schools feel like it's the counselor's job to treat emotional aspects of a child, while teachers are mainly academics. I think one thing that makes some so effective for students is the fact that teachers focus just as much, if not more, on the emotional well-being of a child as they do on academics.
We believe that in our district, as well as many other districts, standardized test scores and district level standards / how the district looks on paper takes top priority. This is because the school assessment methods make it so educators and administrators are so focused on the standards and numbers, when in reality, school assessments do not paint a full picture of school's success. We think that social emotional learning, or SEL, should be a mandatory class in every public school. All students, not just those with mental health issues, need to learn how to properly regulate their emotions for when they become productive adults in our society, which we think is everyone's goal. Another problem we see is evaluations for 504s and IEPs take an extremely long time. We understand that there are limited resources, which is why we believe if we funded our mental health programs more students would be able to get the help they need faster.
I also believe that we need therapeutic programs in our public schools, especially high school. While I was at Salem High School, a program that was especially helpful was the Hawthorne program. It was a therapeutic setting for kids to go to who needed a quiet and nice place for a while. With its own personal counselor and academics director that could advocate for students who have a difficult time doing that for themselves. Unfortunately, this program's budget was cut. Myself and many other students suffered. I witnessed many students being turned away because their issues weren't severe enough when the year before they had qualified. This is when I left Salem Prep. I believe not only would their therapeutic programs and treatment help students feel better in schools, but that would improve our attendance, it would improve our test scores, graduation rates. Anxiety and depression have a direct effect on students' attendance and effort. I experienced it with dozens of students. I do not believe it's a coincidence that the ethnic group with the lowest graduation rates are Latinos, with around 72% graduating in our district. When in our country, Latinos are the race most affected by major depressive episodes and are the second least treated behind people of Asian descent. With more funds, counselors, and education for both teachers and students, I feel all of our schools could dramatically change for the better. Thank you for having us, airing what we have to say. I greatly appreciate it. So do all the staff and students from Salem Prep.
Thank you, both of you, both Robin and Alexis, for sharing with us ways that we can help improve our district, from addressing mental health to making sure students feel comfortable in school, and trying to address how we reduce the stigma, and not certainly making sure none of our students feel like outcasts, and ways we can do that. You've even given us some samples and some suggestions, which is really appreciated as part of our student showcase, not just to hear a student voice, but also to hear some potential solutions, oriented solutions where students and staff can be helpful. Are there questions or comments for, Mr. Edmonds, please?
Yeah, I just want to point out real quick, great job to both Robin and Alexis. They were the brave two representatives that were willing to come on tonight and do this meeting. But this is the work of a large portion of our student body who have worked together to discuss these ideas, run through the 5 Whys protocol, analyze them more deeply, and really write down their thoughts in a way that they felt that they could make a difference and make an impact in their community. So these are two brave students that are up here representing a lot of hard work from a lot of hardworking students. So great job to both of you guys.
Thanks, Mr. Edmonds. Dr. Wright?
Yeah, I want to thank you again, Alexis and Robin. I've been fortunate to hear you present through their advocacy. They asked to be on the agenda at one of our executive team, our cabinet meetings, and they zoomed in to meet with the executive team of the district. And it was just really powerful to have students share their thoughts as we were, shaping direction of the district and our policy. And then they asked if they could come to a school committee meeting. And I love that I got a follow up right before break saying, are we on? Are we all set? So the passion in which this is legitimate passion. This is not, a school project that they're just checking off. I know, having talked with Alexis and Robin, I met with them in person at Salem Prep, that this is something they really want to leave their mark on the district. And, I think they have a lot that we all can learn from about things we should do differently and can do differently in the district. So I'm looking forward to seeing this change project through the end, right? Because I think part of it is to put together some additional solutions that can help drive what we do moving forward. So you guys are getting better with your presentation every time, and it's super powerful. And I know you were nervous the first time we met, but you wouldn't do it from this presentation here tonight. I do want to also call out Miss Mandel, who I know a real supporter as well. We should shout out to Miss Mandel, who I know is a valued member of the team at Salem Prep, and has been the educator lead on this YPAR project with the equity imperative. So thank you, Carly, as well, for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zreik. And I just thank you so much for all hearing. Again, this is such a powerful message from our students. And it's been an honor to help facilitate this and just super inspiring hearing the words of these young people. And again, thank you so much for hearing their message.
Thank you, Ms. Mandel. Any other questions or comments from school committee members? Dr. Pangalo?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It was, yeah, as everyone was saying, it's really powerful. One thing that really jumped out at me was your point that evaluations for 504s and IEPs sometimes take a while. And I'm sure that there are many reasons for that. But I'm wondering, and I guess this question is more to Dr. Zreik, but if there are ways that we can, while that process is underway with evaluating the 504, the IEP, if there are ways that we can address some unmet student needs during that process, or what we're currently doing and maybe what we can expand on doing. Maybe we can check back on that at a future meeting. The other thing is, that made me think is I'm so glad that we're now having the high schools working in tandem more and hopefully having more communication, because it sounds like Salem Prep is working really well for all of you, or for both of you, and hopefully for all of you. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from what goes on at Salem Prep. It's such an incredible school. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Any other comments or questions for Alexis or Robin? Ms. Cornell?
I just want to say thank you both. And you would not know that you were nervous at all if you were. I feel like you weren't. And I also want to say how impressed I am with the level of research that you've done. You really came into this meeting with a lot of really good information. And, it's one thing to be passionate about something, but it's another thing to like really do your homework and know, your subject really intimately, and you do. And I would love to see it. I would love to see all that research once you have the whole thing put together.
Thanks, Ms. Cornell. Anyone else? Ms. Manning?
I just want to thank the two students for a great job for the courage involved, but also the work involved behind the presentation. I've thought the prep does a great job for a long time. They do some really, really, really good work. So congratulations to everybody working down there.
Thanks, Ms. Manning. Mr. Cruz?
And if I could just add, I think to Ms. Cornell's point regarding the research, what really jumped out at me was the highlighting of some of the disparities that exist within the district, but then also the importance of thinking about where these metrics like dropout rates, student achievement, how they're impacted by other things outside of the classroom. So I appreciate both Alexis and Robin illuminating the fact that our district is more than just the test scores on paper, and that there's always the context and the story behind the student experience that matters as well. So kudos to both of you. SEL is a really important part of the work that we need to be doing in our district. And I've been to the prep a number of times, and I've seen that community that you've all built with respect to some of your sessions in the morning and how you're all really focused on rowing in the same direction with making sure that you and your peers have what you need in the classroom. So really just appreciating both of your advocacy, and kudos for knowing your targets. You know your targets and you know them very well when it comes to the advocacy work. So take that skill set. This is also civics in action of being able to identify who the decision makers are, who holds power, and then coming directly to them and not letting up. So I expect that we'll get some follow-up from you all down the line about what we can be doing with our power to address some of these issues. So thank you again.
Any other comments or questions from committee members or Ms. Mandel?
I just want to add, yes, that this is the beginning of an incredible process and is part of the Student Voice Project. Absolutely, the timeline that it follows is these guys are going to continue to research the topic, and in the end, you'll hear from all the schools making some recommendations based on their findings. So more to look forward to from these guys.
Fantastic. Well, I think we really appreciate you being with us this evening. We definitely hear you. value your perspective and are looking forward to working with you to try and make improvements. I think as a district, we always want to look for ways that we can do things better, and having your voice being added to that is really important. And Alexis, I was so glad to hear you say you've been with us all the way since your Bentley pre-K days, all right? That's terrific. All right, I'm going to move us on to the agenda if there are no other questions. And just really, again, thank you to Mr. Edmonds, Ms. Bandel, and to Alexis and Robin for being here and being part of our student showcase and helping us learn how we can do things a little bit better and sharing your perspective with us on that front. Our next item on the agenda is public comment. You guys are more than welcome to stay, but you can also sign off. All right, take care. Is public comment. I'm going to ask Jensen if she can help us identifying what we have for comments and commenters to date.
Sure thing. We have a few that were submitted and a couple that want to speak. So we'll read the ones submitted first and then promote others to talk after.
That sounds great. If I could ask the folks who are promoting to talk, just to be please mindful of the time constraints we're operating under. We do have other things on the agenda today. And just if folks could also remind everyone to please be respectful when addressing your comments to the school committee. Thank you.
All right, so I'll get us started. The first one is from Tom Granitsass from 33 Buffum Street. He writes, I believe that it is clear that moving forward with removing the mask mandate and switching to a freedom of choice is appropriate at this time. As I understand some parents and teachers' concerns over the spread of COVID-19, I do believe that we've learned quite a lot about this virus and what preventative measures to take. Children have been made to cover their faces and wear masks for over 2 years now, and I do think that it is time to follow the guidelines given to us by the CDC and the government officials, as well as the data, and move forward from this and allow it to be a choice. Thank you. Next comment is from Mackenzie Schultz, 31 Valley Road, Nahant, Mass. Comment reads, my name is Mackenzie Schultz and I'm one of the SPS district's float nurses. I'm here tonight because I believe at this time we should move to optional masking. The past 2 years have been incredibly difficult. Our students, parents, and staff have needed to adjust to a new normal because of this pandemic, and this has been overwhelming for many. When it comes to masking in the schools, I would like to be completely transparent. A large portion of our day is spent asking individuals to fix their masks because they're not being worn properly. Thankfully, the school department has taken great strides to prevent spreading COVID through our schools. This included upgrading our water bubblers into water dispensing stations, hand sanitizers readily available throughout the schools, and always circulating fresh air when weather permits. The district provides weekly pooled COVID testing for all students and staff. We are holding vaccine clinics and rapid home test kits are being distributed regularly. I believe by continuing to use these mitigation factors with our schools, our families should be able to decide which option of masking is right for their individual family. With the schools using these mitigation factors, I kindly ask for families to stay home when sick, continue to wash their hands frequently, get vaccinated if able, and take advantage of our testing options. The next comment is from Anna Brea of 25 Bellevue Avenue. Comment reads, on behalf of Voices Against Injustice in the VAI Award Committee, I would like to announce that the nomination deadline for the 2022 Raising Leader Award has been extended until March 16. The Raising Leader Award recognizes a young person living in Salem or attending a Salem school or community program who has demonstrated a commitment to human rights and social justice through service and leadership. It includes a $500 scholarship. Nomination forms outlining eligibility and process are available on our website, voicesagainstinjustice.org. Please note that while we have received some strong nominations as of the time of this writing, we have not received a nomination from a Salem High School student or for a Salem High School student. Next comment is Donna Fritz of 57 Summit Street. The comment reads, thank you, school committee, for your thoughtful consideration of the mask mandate. I have been subbing at the high school and middle school, and I hope that you vote to move to mask optional. What I am experiencing in the schools are already in a mask optional world, so you might as well make it reality. One-way masking is already at work because those who want to wear them are wearing them properly, and those who do not are not wearing them properly. Thank you, Donna. The next comment is from Phil Gilio of 54 Lawrence Street. The comment reads, "Good evening, members of the school committee. Just like to take a moment and thank each and every one of you for the very useful information meeting on February 15th. Dr. Kristen Pangala, your knowledge goes unnoticed. So thank you. I thought I heard that teachers won't be allowed to compel students to wear a mask. So now you have a teacher who's stuck in the middle of getting the child sicker themselves. I'm asking that keeping the mask optional will all cause more problems with staff. Vaccine rates are low inside the schools, as everyone is asking how is it different? Well, it's because a community, a parent, caregiver, we need to consider helping others getting vaccinated. We are also still in flu season. I hope that you vote to keep the mask on for a bit longer. Some people could be struggling to make an appointment to get a vaccine. We need more mobile walk-up, walk-in clinics to make it easier." Next comment is from Mandy Spittle of 8 at Woodbury Court. "When making the decision to lift the public school mask mandate, I respectfully request that you wait 2 weeks, if not more, from today. I would also request that you start a conversation in the schools to help support the students who will continue to remain masked. As a parent of an immune-compromised child, I think it is important to help the students and community understand the reasons why some students will remain masked. Once masks are removed, there is going to be a significant increase in illnesses, and this will cause more work for the nursing staff. They have worked so hard the past 2 years, and I hope that strong systems will be put into place to help support them while they navigate optional masking." The next comment is from Erin Harrington, 15 Lafayette Ave in Danvers, teacher at Saltonstall. "I hope the school committee will not vote to remove the mask mandate in Salem schools. It does not make sense to stop universal masking just because we're tired of it. Students deserve a safe learning environment and is still in a still uncontrolled and mutating pandemic. Safe means masks for everyone. Universal masking is a layer of safety for everyone, and moving to mask optional will make everyone, including those who continue to mask, less safe. We have a duty of care to every child that comes into our schools, and a mask optional policy would be deeply inequitable. Mask optional means we care more about pandemic fatigue than the safety of our immunocompromised students, like those with diabetes and asthma. Mask optional means we care more about an inconvenience than about the legitimate fears of students who wear masks every day to protect their siblings too young to be vaccinated, or their grandparents and great-grandparents at higher risk of complications. Practically, mask optional means we are letting children decide if they're going to wear a mask at school or not, passing the buck to them to decide and deal with the consequences, rather than act as adults we are to keep them safe, even if it's annoying. Please keep the masks for all." One moment, we had a couple come in. I need to identify. All right, we have Dawn Seifert of 10 Daniel Street. "We've been supporters of mask mandate in Salem schools for more than a year and a half now and believe it has helped to reduce the spread of COVID-19. But with just 39 active COVID cases as of February 28, 72% of the population vaccinated and no new variants having been reported in months, we think it's time for the decision whether or not students should wear masks to be up to parents. The CDC last week changed its recommendations on masking indoors, and Massachusetts as a whole is already much further along in vaccination, as well as getting over the Omicron surge than the rest of the country. Masks are a relatively small burden compared to the devastation due to the pandemic. However, there are inarguably downsides to kids wearing them. Communication is harder, and socialization between kids, one of the most important aspects of a public school education, is severely hampered. The behavior problems we've seen in schools this year are at least partially caused by the difficulty in students reading social cues. We urge you to make mask wearing optional as soon as possible." Next comment is from Liz Frazier of 2 Warner Street. It reads, "Our family feels that relaxing in-school mask mandates, given recent encouraging public health metrics, is appropriate this time. The CDC has just relaxed mask guidelines, and many schools in our area are also adopting this mindset. Like many others who have commented, safety measures in the schools are rigid and transmission among children is low. Mental health issues are taking a toll on many of the students, and it's time for them to regain some normalcy. Optional masking allows those with concern to continue to do so until they feel it is safe. Thank you. And John McCary of 5 Nurse Way writes, good evening. This past Thursday, my wife Ashley and I emailed the school committee regarding the masking topic, as we have a 7-year-old enrolled at Carlton Elementary School who has never experienced school without wearing a mask. I would like to thank Dr. Pangallo and Ms. Cornell for responding to us. We are, however, disappointed that the other board members did not reply. For the record, our family is 100% supportive of ending masking altogether, but also fully respects anyone's choice to continue to wear a mask. As of writing this, there is no federal mask mandate in the United States. As of today, the school mask mandate ordered by the state of Massachusetts ended. Additionally, on February 8th, 2022, the Salem Board of Health voted to rescind the masking requirement in Salem. These decisions were made based upon public health data related to falling case counts and hospitalizations. Additionally, the CDC has recognized these trends, and on Friday, February 25, announced revised masking requirements in schools, the criteria which I believe, as of today, Salem meets to remove masking. Children and young adults continue to be the population segment least affected by COVID-19, both from a symptomatic and transmissibility standpoint. Why is the school committee, who has deferred to such public health guidance all along, now considering challenging public health experts with enacting its own mask mandate? And that ends the submitted comments, so we can move forward in promoting others to speak. We're going to promote Barbara McLernan of 25 Sunset Drive. Would like to speak about the kickoff for the Salem Teachers Union Salem High Scholarships. So we will allow Barbara to talk.
Barbara, can you hear us?
Barbara is using an older version of Zoom, so she will actually be promoted to the panel in order to speak.
All right. Hi, Barbara. You can unmute and go ahead and address your issue with us.
The old Zoom thing. So good evening, Mayor Driscoll, school board members, and our extended Salem school community. I am Barbara McLernan, Social Director of the Salem Teachers Union, and I also work at Collins Middle School. Tonight, I would like to preview what will be happening with the Salem Teachers Union Scholarship Drive over the next few months. Our end game is to have a raffle calendar for the month of May, where prizes will be drawn daily. The raffle calendar will raise funds for our Salem High School seniors who qualify for Salem for the STU scholarships. Soon, we'll be asking community members and local businesses for donations so that each day in May will be full of wonderful prizes. We'd like to see all kinds of goods and services highlighted on the calendar. And this letter will physically and electronically be sent to merchants. And this is what the letter was going to look like. It's going to say, I am writing on behalf of the Salem Teachers Union Scholarship Drive to request a donation for our May 2022 raffle calendar supporting college scholarships for our Salem High seniors. During this event, which reaches hundreds of community members, we will raffle gift cards, merchandise, and services generously donated by businesses like yours. The event will pay for 4 1,000 scholarships that are awarded by the Salem Teachers Union. We would greatly appreciate any donation you could make. Should you donate, your business will be recognized on the 2022 raffle calendar, and the Salem Teachers Union will also provide you with a donation letter with our tax exempt ID number for your records. And then it goes on to have my information that you can, anybody that wants to donate can get in touch with me with. So that's what's going out, and hopefully we'll get the okay to send something similar to parents through Parent Square. And the calendars will be available electronically right around April break. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Barbara. know we have some other speakers, Jensen, is that right?
Yep, the final speaker is Ian Berman, 1401 Crane Brook Way of Peabody, and I will allow her to speak.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, Mayor Driscoll, Dr. Zreich, and members of the school committee. In regards to your vote on the mask mandate this evening, I would ask that you move cautiously in your decision to remove mandatory masks in school. In the past, we've seen infection rates soar after a vacation week. We have immunocompromised students and adults in our buildings who cannot afford to get sick. Some of us go home to immunocompromised family members. I know educators who remain cautious in their lives outside of school as well in an effort to stay healthy. At my school, though, it is business as usual. We have small group work happening. We are sharing supplies. We go to our specialist classes and play in the gym, and we are singing and dancing in music class and doing our artwork in art class. And the kids are doing it with a mask on. Isolation that was brought on by COVID remote learning affected many of our students in a negative way. I've seen firsthand effects of this with my own grandchildren. However, I see kids thriving in school now despite wearing a mask. They're learning and growing. I've seen so many signs of compassion and caring when a classmate is out sick. I know many will disagree with me, but I don't believe masking is harming our children to the extent that it's being put out there in the public. Illness isolation has done much more damage. I do think we need to, at some point, remove masks, but let's make sure that one, it's done safely and thoughtfully by looking at case counts, and two, that we use those case counts to remask if we see numbers going up again. As for me, I will remain masked to support any student who feels they need to continue masking up while in my classroom. Secondly, in regards to your discussion this evening to add a break in during November, I don't support this. It will negatively affect our lowest paid employees at a time of year when pocketbooks are often hit hard with Thanksgiving and then subsequent holiday celebrations. However, I would love to see a bit of an extension to the winter holiday, giving educators and families a day or two before December 25th to be able to travel, and perhaps a day or two after January 1st to return home from a trip. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Berman. Any other comments, Jensen?
That wraps it up.
For public comment, okay.
Yep.
We do require that public commenters sign up beforehand, and so I think we've heard from everybody who signed up beforehand. I believe Ms. Spittle signed up beforehand and we read her comment. Is that accurate? I do see a hand raised by her, so I just want to.
Yes, Mandy Spittles was read aloud.
Okay. So I'm going to keep us moving on the agenda and turn it over to the superintendent's report.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor. Thanks for all the public comment. It's helpful to hear the perspectives of our community about especially masking. And I'm going to start my comments tonight with a presentation with us recommendations related to where we move with our how we move forward with our COVID-19 mitigation strategies per the request of the school committee from our last meeting before February break. So I'm going to ask Chelsea to put the slides up on the screen to get started here. I do hope everybody had a wonderful February break. It was restful, relaxing, and we were back in the swing of things today. Hard to believe that tomorrow is March 1st. But with that, we can go to the next slide. I want to just start with the context for the discussion. So you can go to the next slide, Chelsea. Okay, so at our last meeting on February 15th, I just want to remind the audience and the school committee, we had a series of participants who were, experts, health experts, who gave us their ideas, their thoughts about where we go with the virus. And we looked at some data, as a school committee, around where we were in mid-February. And I just want to review the key takeaways that came for that meeting and why we're here tonight. around what around these recommendations. So Salem Public Schools had a mask mandate in place prior to the state's policy. So per the state guidance, a change at the state level does not require any changes at the district level or the district level. The state is empowering the local district to make decisions around the continuation or not of the mask mandate. Additionally, we was discussed at this meeting that we've seen an increase in cases after each vacation period. So we decided, or the committee decided, I should say, there would be no immediate changes following the February break, which is obviously today, and that we would revisit conversation here tonight. And folks talked about having a 2-week window after the break. Came up during our conversations on the February 15th meeting. So that helped inform this presentation here. Along through this pandemic, we've tried to take a data-driven approach to decision-making. We tried to use the information we had at our disposal locally, at the state level, at the federal level. And that's what, the committee instructed us to do here again today, is to always take a data-driven approach. There was clarity, or there was a clear expectation that we'd be using metrics in whatever we decide to do moving forward. That came up in the conversation of the 15th. We also discussed, or the committee discussed, the importance of moving to a long-term management of the pandemic, that we have to move beyond this idea that, the virus is with us. Regardless, it will continue to be with us for a long time, and we have to move towards normalcy, but be able to manage it, appropriately, given that we know that the virus isn't going anywhere. And we've learned a lot about the virus over the last 2 years. And then, of course, that we would be reconvening here, and there would be public comment and then additional deliberation from the school committee. So that's what I took away, and that, from that meeting. And that's why since that meeting, my team has, put together a series of thoughts for the school committee to consider based on everything they directed us to do. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Chelsea, who's going to give you a little more of the context of what's happened since the 15th and what else we've learned, and what some of the newer guidance has been since our last meeting on February 15th. Chelsea.
Thanks, Dr. Drake. Sorry, there we go. So as you have heard in the news, we did have 2 big announcements. One preceded our previous meeting, and then the one that came out over break. So on February 10th, Governor Baker did announce the state level mask mandate would end today, the 28th, in schools. Again, as Dr. covered, we have a Salem Public Schools mask mandate in place, but the state level mandate lifted today. And then over break, the CDC did release more nuanced guidance based on 3 different factors about new COVID hospitalizations, hospital capacity, and new COVID cases, which did shift the recommendation for the majority of the country, including schools, in that process, and buses and some of the other small details that you'll see throughout this. So these are 2 larger shifts, and they do reflect changes in our COVID context, and I will continue through with some of these pieces. As we look at the communities around us, we have seen neighboring communities either move to mask optional beginning in 2 weeks in Lynn and Swampscott, or beginning today in Peabody, Danvers, Beverly, and Marblehead, based on their own communities' decisions. And this is a lot of data that you've seen a couple of times. So instead of going very detailed into the data, you can see in the top left-hand corner here, this is new Salem cases week by week, which just shows you last year in yellow and this year in orange, which is thankfully to the Salem dashboard, one of the many different ways that we can look at this. And you can see the ups and downs of trends, and you can see Omicron is in those orange bars to the right of this chart. And we have come back down from that curve. You can see the Salem version of that on the right, and with student cases, that's average daily cases in blue, and orange is staff. So the time periods are slightly different, as we had the 3-day week coming back from the break. But you can see now that we've sort of leveled out, and we did see a dip before break. And the numbers that came in today, while they might not represent every case over break yet, as people are still some people were absent today, did indicate a relatively stable, roughly 1 to 2 cases per day over the break. And the bottom, you can see our wastewater surveillance data, which has been a very strong predictor for us as a community. You can see in blue the North Shore as a whole, and in red Salem. So another piece of data that we've had. You can see that large spike with Omicron on the left, and then you can see just the January and February data on the right, which does show you that we are back down. We had not really crossed that 1.0 level before Omicron, and we rewrote the scales during the surge. And so you can see that we're back down to those pre-Omicron levels. And then the last piece of context is just as we are talking about this, and as many of our public comments indicated today, this is about a multi-layered approach to minimizing the risk of spread. And so this is straight from our slides in August when we were discussing our plans to return, that there are multiple components of this. And so as you will see speak tonight, it is about kind of packaging the different layers of mitigation based on the risk. And so in August, when we were coming back to school, we were talking about strong health and hygiene, talking about surveillance testing, supplemental ventilation, a universal mask policy, and recommending meals and mask breaks outdoors. And so you will see this kind of combination of factors again come up in our recommendations as we think about the right sets of options for the levels based on the data of how to prevent the risk of spread and how to manage this more long term. So this is just a reminder and not going into the details here. And I will pass it back to Dr. Dreik, who will talk more about how we took together the notes and put it back for you to consider tonight.
Yeah, so in talking about our recommendation, you can go to the next slide, Chelsea. The recommendation that we have this evening, again, comes from our conversation on the 15th. And we again want to be thoughtful. We want to use metrics, and we want to, it seems like we're on a very strong path here. We did want to account for the bump after the break, and that we did get a lot of feedback from people about the importance of what we had seen historically after breaks. But what we would like to propose is a process that would actually go even beyond this decision, that would look at decisions related to the future of the pandemic, as I state, of the virus. But as I had stated before, right, we have to learn how to manage this. And we don't know what the next few months, years will entail, but we, feel like through what we've learned that this recommendation is about how do we make thoughtful, informed decisions moving forward, relative to this virus, depending on, what comes up in the coming weeks, months, and years potentially. So first of all, it's important that we formalize the role of our health advisors. None of us, most of us on the school, most members of the school committee, certainly members of my team, we're not health experts. And we wanted to make sure we've been relying on these folks, both local, doctors, scientists, so forth. And we wanted to formalize this body that they would help make recommendations moving forward to the school committee so that they could help us determine what the right level of risk mitigation for the district. Everybody has different opinions about what we should doing, but we have developed, I think, a strong, very, objective group of advisors who all along have, I think, steered us pretty well throughout this pandemic and virus. We want to formalize that. So that's our first recommendation here, is to formalize that body. And I'll say more about it in a second. The second is to have a more thoughtful way of looking at decisions that we make around the level of mitigation, masking being one of them, okay? And to have layers from level 1 being low risk to level 4 being very significant risk as a response to a series of metrics. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But again, from the start, we talked about being data-driven. We talked about relying on, metrics to drive our decision-making. So we want to continue that with this decision around masks, but also other decisions related to the virus. Next slide, Chelsea. Okay, so health advisors, we haven't delimited who these folks are, but we want to have a group of advisors meeting at least quarterly that would meet with myself. And there would be at least one school committee member on it. Obviously, our Director of Nursing and Health Services, Dr. Charlene Mosky-Weber, a member of the Salem's Public Health. We have a district physician who many of you have heard from during the pandemic, Dr. Campbell, or if she is not available, another medical doctor, and then another member of the Salem community with relevant experience. And the idea is that the school committee would empower this group of advisors to recommend the right level of risk mitigation for the district moving forward. That's again, this is recommendation A of formalizing this body. I mean, we've in effect had this body all along, but we've never really formalized. And again, we're learning how to manage with the virus. We think that this is important, or to live with the virus. We think that this is an important, an important body that we need to organize. I never thought I'd be, thinking about having a formal health advisor role. I thought having one Director of Nursing and Health Services made sense, but we didn't expect that we would be here 2 years later either. So I think it's prudent for the committee to consider this. Next slide, Chelsea. So recommendation B is about our strategy for making decisions. There's a series of data here and metrics that we think are critical, that again, we've learned a lot through this entire pandemic. We've learned that we've learned not to be boxed into specific numbers, but we've learned that there's key data points that we want to look at as a community. And you can see what they are here. We've talked about them. If you've enjoyed watching school committee meetings for the last 2 years, these are things that we've talked about throughout, right? Which is the number of staff and student case counts within the Salem Public Schools, the number of cases per 100,000 residents in the city of Salem. We've talked sort of ad nauseum about that over time. Wastewater, which no idea I'd be talking about wastewater as much as we have been, but I've learned a lot that wastewater surveillance, as Chelsea mentioned today, is a strong predictor of what to expect. We've obviously talked about access to and level of vaccination rates in schools. Like does everybody have access? What are vaccination rates? We've been reporting on that throughout. And then, the importance of having a well-fitting, high filtration mask, at least having access to that. Certainly if we move to an optional environment, we need to make sure that there's access for all our staff and students to have access to high quality masks. And so again, we've learned what that means to have well-fitting high filtration masks throughout this pandemic. We don't see one metric or data point triggering different levels, and Chelsea will talk about the levels in a second, but rather we see a combination of these metrics and trends of whether, of helping guide whether we're, if we're at a higher risk or a lower risk, right? At this point, right, we are on what appears to be a path, right, that we can lower the risk level at this moment, right? And we obviously have to see what our case counts are for the remainder of this week and into next week. We want to pay attention to that, but this committee would consider if the trends and look at these metrics in totality, not focused on one over the other. And of course, these factors have to be updated depending on what the CDC has to say and other guidance that we learn about the changing virus. We had no idea that there was going to be a variant that would blow our socks off, a month and a half ago. It was the hardest month in the entire pandemic, right? So we don't know if that's going to happen again. It very well, something like that could happen. Obviously, it doesn't appear that we're headed to that track, but, I would have said this school year would have looked a whole lot different than it has thus far. So, and so now to the metric part, I'm going to turn it, or not to the metric, to the leveling, risk levels. I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea.
Thank you, Dr. Strike. So I'm going to go back through and talk about the bundling of these layers of mitigation from that slide that I was talking about before. So this year, we have been what we're now calling level 3 for most of the year, which has been requiring increased air ventilation and filtration. These are our windows open and our HEPA filters. We have strongly recommended outdoor meals whenever possible. We have required universal masking, and we have strongly recommended our weekly testing and surveillance program. We also see what we learned about was level 4, which we added when Omicron came in December and January. And so we, in addition to level 3, added in, we reduced or suspended in-person meetings, parent-teacher conferences, and PD, and we did maximize physical distancing and classroom setup again. So we were looking for ways to add even more layers to level 3, which is where we've been operating for most of the year. In both of these cases, masks have been required. And so what we've been working on with our advisors is looking at what would additional levels look like that were a step down from this level. And we've mapped out level 1 and level 2. So I'll go to level 2 next, which is a step down from level 3. Here we would have the increased air ventilation would remain. We would still recommend outdoor meals, although not strongly recommend. And we would strongly recommend and ensure access to quality masks for everyone, especially those who are at risk or have household risk. But we would move down from, that required to a strongly recommended on the masks. And we would again recommend weekly surveillance testing, although maybe move down from that strongly recommend. And then you could see a level 1, which is going to masks fully optional, recommending increased air ventilation, options for outdoor meals, recommending the use of, we could still utilize surveillance and symptomatic testing as needed, and we could increase health and hygiene. I should note, increased health and hygiene should be with us for the duration of our time. We've all learned good practices, and is not actually named in every level, but should be maintained from level 1 and above. And so what you can see is our attempt to kind of package together based on if the risk was higher or lower, based on our learning. So level 3 is where we've been most of this year. We didn't know we had level 4 until it came to us with Omicron. And so we went back to some of those practices from last year that we learned in the beginning of reopening. And we are introducing here level 2 and level 1 as kind of steps down depending on the level of risk. And so these levels are new to us today. I hope that we're clear, and I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Zreich.
Yeah, Chelsea, I just want to, can you just go back?
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize, like, level 1, we think is here to stay, right? And the notion of, we should have been doing these things before, right? Outdoor dining was, it's a popular thing. It should have been a popular thing in schools as well, giving students that option to have outdoor dining, having better ventilation, paying more attention to our HVAC systems, filtration. Those are things that moving forward, we absolutely have to. We see a scenario, masks may be needed for kids who want to wear them, who are immunocompromised or have somebody at risk in the household, moving forward. That's been a practice in other countries. And, and just not something that's been a practice here. We've learned a lot about, people should have that option if they want moving forward. And then, continuing to, like Chelsea said, better hygiene practice and health practices. I mean, all of us, I think, have learned a lot about, the importance of hand washing and sanitizing just in general. And it'll make our schools a healthier and safer place to be, COVID-19 or not. So I just want to emphasize that, again, this is about living with this virus. And doing a better job as schools of making sure we're keeping our families and students and staff safe. Next slide, Chelsea. Yeah, if you could put the whole thing up, that would be good, because I want to start actually with the timeline. So just to be clear around the timeline, the committee was clear that they felt that at least 2 weeks were needed after the break. So that's part of this recommendation, that no sooner than Monday, March 14th. That we would move to no masking. Like I said, seem to be on a very strong path. But we would want our health advisors to weigh in about moving us back to the chart you just saw. Stepping down, as Chelsea called it, from level 3 to level 2 would be triggered by the recommendation by the health advisors. We would have a meeting by March 10th so that we could review the relevant data at that point and provide a recommendation to the superintendent, which we would announce or share on March 11th, which is we have a newsletter that goes out, and that we would announce any change in level to take place and date of change. And it could be as soon as Monday, March 14th. We will communicate with families and our staff along the way. As these meetings are coming, so people do have ample time for whenever the change occurs. But that stepping down from level 3 to level 2 would be what the health advisors would consider at their session, at our session next week. Just some important considerations that I want to ask the school committee to think about. And this has come feedback and questions that we've received in the last couple of weeks. We do recognize that many of our pre-K students are not yet eligible for the vaccine, right? Because they're below the age of ability to access the vaccine. And, that's something for the committee to weigh in, if there should be a different recommendation for the level of risk mitigation. When I say committee, I mean the advisory group. I would pose that to the health advisors, because I do think there is a question about access for pre-K students. We have the students who are at the ECC, as well as the 4 pre-K classrooms, 2 at Bates and 2 at Horace Mann. So I do have questions, and about that age group. We also need to support our staff, our teachers, to create a supportive and safe culture around respecting those who choose to wear masks. Because if we went to a change in the mask requirement, it would obviously be optional for students to continue to wear masks. And we want to create a safe environment for our young people and staff, whoever feels like they need to wear and want to wear masks can do so, and that there won't be issues around bullying or teasing related to the use of masks or peer pressure, and supporting whatever family decision and student decision there is around the use of masks. And so there's some important messaging that we have to do to our families, to our students, and to our staff around that. I just want to be clear, there are no current changes in our isolation guidance at this point, in terms of what we put out a few weeks ago, or, and our test to return program that we've established, and our testing regimen that includes our pool testing, as well as our test at home as well. And then the requirement that to return after 5 days, you do have to test. You do have to provide a negative rapid test. While there's been a change to masking on busing as of Friday, now masks are no longer required on school buses. If the local municipality decides to lift the mask requirement, they are still required in health offices. That has not changed. So I want to make that clear to this committee and to the public. And then I do want this body to consider sports and performing arts, that we have some performances and we have some games upcoming in the next 2 weeks. And right now they are still operating under the SPS mask mandate, even though the participants, we required all athletes and all drama performers to be fully vaccinated. And we do have a boys basketball game this Friday at home. And then we have this is a good plug. It's time to plug our drama performances. Into the Woods is that, I think it's called Into the Woods. The high school performance is, I believe, Friday night, and there's 2 shows on Sunday, as well as we have Your Good Man Charlie Brown. Collins School is performing next weekend, and so would like the committee to consider whether the mask mandate would still apply in those cases as well. And again, the boys basketball team plays Friday night, 6:30 at Salem High School in the playoffs. So I'm going to pause there. I know there's a lot of information for folks to digest, and I hope we were able to deliver on what the committee asked us to do in preparation for this meeting, and we welcome the discussion that follows.
Great. I see a couple of hands. Is that a question, Mr. Cruz?
It is. Thank you, Mayor Driscoll. And thank you, Dr. Shrike, Chelsea, and team for putting together that presentation. A lot of great follow-up, I think, were answered from the previous meeting that we had regarding our policy, and then also some of the mitigation strategies. So really appreciated that. We started with setting the context about what the statewide end to that mandate did and didn't do with respect to the good work that's already been underway in Salem. To view what I'm seeing recommended here as a continuation of our efforts. So I appreciate the coherence that's been built into this strategy. A couple of things that I just wanted to note. So I'm going to work backwards. I wanted to start with the last slide in which you noted that what's our role in terms of, depending on where we land with this recommendation, in terms of making sure that students who decide to wear masks feel optional. I think from a communication standpoint, I think we just needed to make it, if we land at masks being optional, that we also are just talking about generally respect for students that choose to wear masks and students that don't choose to wear masks, because it could also lead to some conversations the other way as well. So I think we should be pretty clear about that. Some of the additional considerations that are going into my decision making are certainly around I think some of the advocacy that we've received in recent days regarding some of our students that are immunocompromised, and then those that have members of their family, teachers and students alike. And so then the other piece that I'm thinking about as well is you had mentioned some different approaches here regarding where we're at with our littlest learners who don't have the option of getting vaccinated, and how there's kind of that tiered system. And so we have some schools that are in different positions with respect to how, and apologies, my daughter's excited about this conversation, so you might hear her screaming in the background there. But I'm wondering about, for schools like the Bentley, where we have some of these factors that we set out here, are the advisors going to be taking a look at these schools just district wide, or are they going to say in special circumstances where we have the ECE is integrated within the same school building, is there going to be a different recommendation for what happens with the Bentley? So those are just some of the things that I'm considering. And then I'm wondering about the tiers and how they apply to the students that are participating in the drama and the sports, and how, is there thought being given to the fact that we have 100% vaccination rate, and is there are there students going to move on the sliding scale with respect to, if we're at 4, there's the mask requirement, but we're also requiring those students to be vaccinated to participate in high respiratory activities. So is the recommendation also around the vaccination requirement, or are we going to keep that regardless of what level the district's at? So I'm just trying to understand a little bit more there.
So there was a lot of questions in that mix, Mr. Cruz. I heard variations on how the how the mask requirements might apply based on age and school. And would the health committee be taking that up along with other sort of variations between students and the like? Is that something you want to answer, Dr. Zreich, or would you rather just let's take we've got Amanda Campbell and other folks who also have questions, and then you can respond to what you're hearing.
I can just quickly say, Manny, to respond. I think I don't think we were thinking of getting so nuanced as to to us, it was a question of access, right? So everywhere else, there is access by age to the vaccine. There isn't for children under the age of 5. And so I think what I'm suggesting is the consideration for the health advisor would be just looking at the children who are at, in classrooms that serve 4-year-old, or we have 3-year-olds too, 3 and 4-year-olds at ECC, and the 2 Bates and the 2 Horace Mann classrooms. Just those classrooms, but because there isn't access for those children.
Understood. Thanks for the clarification there, Steve.
Ms. Campbell?
Thank you. I have a handful, some logistical and just some points that I think we'll need to consider. The first is I want to make sure that I'm understanding the proposal correctly. So it would be that these health advisors, we as a school committee would be authorizing to make, it's a 2-part. We're authorizing them to make a recommendation, but that recommendation will not come back to the school committee. It will go to the superintendent, who will act upon that. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay, I have some mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, I think it allows us to act very nimbly so that we don't miss opportunities to be at level 1 and 2 in order to move our kids more into, a lesser mitigation situation. Sometimes obviously with a larger, more deliberative body, it takes longer to make decisions. On the other hand, I do worry these are hard decisions. The temptation can be really easy for us to have other people make those decisions for us, because then we're not necessarily responsible for them. That being said, I do feel a little bit of an obligation as an elected official to make that decision and to have sort of that ultimate buck rest with us, because we've been elected to do that job. So I'm wondering if perhaps there's maybe a more middle ground that would allow us to agree upon, as they're looking at the criteria. I know it said they would each be considered sort of holistically, none more important than the other. But I'm wondering if we could set some sort of bounds, because otherwise I think it still is a bit subjective. So like, what is equitable access? What types of case counts are we talking about? What levels of wastewater surveillance are we considering in each of the factors? So I feel like if we set a bit more of the parameters as elected officials, then we'll get the benefit of having relied on our experts to give us the information. We've also been able to weigh in and can the decisions that are made ourselves, and still also then allow us to act more nimbly as situations get better or worse, in order to sort of get that like just right approach. So that's sort of how my feelings are landing in terms of the health advisors. I think that it's a really important thing to have sort of officially. I know we've been operating like that the entire pandemic really. But I think it would be important to have an opportunity to weigh in on the metrics as those who are representing the community. And then I do still have a couple of other questions and points to consider. I don't know if you want me to hold off first.
Keep going.
Okay. I was wondering if we could get, in terms of the levels, to me, optional, recommended, and strongly recommended, those also can feel a bit subjective, and they sort of in the end do mean essentially the same thing, which is not required. I understand the approach, but I think as we're navigating between them, really the main distinction comes between like masking and not universal masking, as well as there were like a few other pieces of criteria that changed. But otherwise, I think they're kind of saying the same thing without saying the same thing. And I wonder if there's just maybe, I'll think about it, but I think that there's probably I think that there might be a better way to sort of say what we're trying to say without making it sound like the same thing. Then the additional point I wanted to raise, this was something that a parent had raised via email, and I think Ms. Manning had brought it up at our last meeting for us to consider, but there's a couple of different pieces here, because so many of our students are minors whose parents are making choices for them, as happens with parents and minors. And when they come to school, we are either then allowing children to choose their own choice or have teachers in the position where they're enforcing the parental choice. And that teacher enforcement, that happens all the time. It happens with field trips. It happens, like teachers are in charge of enforcing a lot of parental choice within the school. But in terms of keeping track of who isn't supposed to be wearing their mask, especially when you factor in tracking kids who are on days 5 through 10, coming back from COVID, I think that's a really important consideration of what do we expect our teachers and staff to do? What are they going to have to enforce as we eventually at some point move into mask optional? That will always be a consideration, whether it's now or much further in the future. The other thing that I wanted to raise was that we have talked a lot about our immunocompromised students and staff, and I think that's hugely important. Within that, though, I do think we have to acknowledge that we also have, more so than almost any other profession, a predominantly female teaching force, which means we have far more teachers out who are pregnant, who are on maternity leave, who are on parental leave, who have tiny little babies at home, more so than almost anywhere else. We have to acknowledge that fact. And I just really think it's important for us to consider. We know the implications of COVID for pregnant women. And we also know that we don't really have here in the United States a cohesive parental leave program. So many of them are extremely anxious about having to use their sick days for COVID time if they were to get COVID. So in addition to carrying the stress of like, I'm pregnant, what type of health implications will that have for me and my tiny human I'm growing? I also need access to my sick days in order to cover my parental leave. And so I just think that that's something that we'll have to consider in addition to, as we talk about our immunocompromised staff and students. And then the last thing I wanted to flag was if we did go this route, it has the announcement happening Friday, March 11th, with it being in place on March 14th. That turnaround isn't really enough time to build that classroom community in terms of students making choices, families making choices. Some people will wear masks, some people won't. There is no classroom day in between. So teachers could, of course, be having that conversation leading up to it. But if it's unnecessary, it is taking time away from learning. And so I think we may want to build in a bit more of a buffer for teachers to do that. That's it.
Thanks, Ms. Campbell. Ms. Manning?
Right, a couple of thoughts. First of all, a question on the Health Advisory Committee. I don't have any problem with the concept of the committee and overall, but I would be more comfortable if I saw a delineation that this is specifically for COVID-related issues that we're talking about, not that all of a sudden the Health Advisory Committee is sort of making decisions on other aspects of health that I think really do. I think I would prefer to keep in the domain of the school committee. I think I just think that would be an important, two sentences, one sentence to make part of that, and then assuming that this may be something that would be in place, as as folks are talking about, this is how things will be, at least in the foreseeable future. Are we looking at the makeup of the committee because of people that we have on that have been helping us now, or should we be looking at more of a role-based committee? And I'm sort of maybe looking in the future a little bit for that, because I don't by any means want to change the makeup right now. The people that are working and have been advising us, I don't have a problem if that morphs into the same people that we're talking on this committee, which I'm assuming that will happen. But maybe something to keep in mind down the road is that we might not want those people on there forever, or we might want see, gee, we wish we had a whatever. So that's a question. And then I don't really know how I feel on this myself, but I'm just raising it an issue. Should we, because we are the folks who people did elect to make decisions, and here are all these decisions, do we need in some type of an override provision or something? I'm not sure if I'm saying we do or we don't. I'm throwing that out for people to talk about tonight, not necessarily feeling either way myself, but I'm just sort of raising those issues as questions or as issues to talk. Two other points, though. I do feel strongly that I think that we do need to come up with a plan for K through 12, but I feel we need to maybe come up with a separate plan for the early childhood center and for our pre-K classrooms. I think that that's an important distinction. They don't have the capability to get the vaccine, so I really think we need to have a different plan for those little guys. And the last one is, as far as the sports and the drama and the events coming up, I would and I would make a motion for this later if it calls for it. I think those dates are very they're either the sports, some of the sports is right in the middle of it, and then if they win, hopefully another game further to the date that we're setting for ourselves, and drama is even closer. I would think that we could make some type of an allowance for students participating while they're actually participating. If they're in the game, take the mask down. And if they're on the bench, and if they're in the locker room, and if they're everywhere else, keep it on. And the same for drama. If they're out on the stage, And if not, let's keep everything in place just a few more days, but I would go in that direction for that.
Thanks, Ms. Manning. Other comments? I want to point one thing out to the committee members. We heard from Ms. Spittle, a written comment earlier. She does have something she wanted to augment. And since she had signed up prior, I do think it's important that we enable that to happen. But we can do that certainly after this discussion, but I just want to reference that. A brief comment, Ms. Spittle.
Mayor Driscoll, she rescinded that. She is no longer available. So she's just listening, but she's going to write you guys separately.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dr. Pangala.
Thanks. Full disclosure, since I've been on the advisory group for the past year and a half or so, we've been talking over this, and I one of the reasons I actually like it is that, it puts these decisions in the hands, or it puts the guidance in the hands of people who have expertise in this area, and there's no guarantee for an elected official, although we are, the buck stops with us, certainly. And I think
Kristen, you're on. There you go.
Yeah, having elected officials with the ability to, as a school committee, we can always change things, we can rescind things, we can adapt things. So I think that just by nature of adopting this, that doesn't remove any authority from the school committee, because we are always empowered to make changes. However, what I think is important is that we have individuals who have background in health, in medicine, in public health, in schools, weighing in on these decisions and discussing them, because what I've seen is that it really requires not just an understanding of science or medicine or schools, it requires really that entire perspective. And so I think that that's a really key aspect. But I think it's important that the school committee is aware that we always have that important role of oversight and ensuring that it's carried out the way we, that is in line with our values. And I think Mary, you asked, Ms. Manning, you asked the question about, is this based on people or roles, and very specifically based on roles, because it should not be dependent on a person. You never, that's too much of a roll of the dice, I think. I also, I think that it is important to look at the other piece in terms of having set thresholds or metrics that I've thought a lot about, is that these have changed time and time again, and it can be a really dynamic situation because the science is evolving so quickly. Just today, there was a new preprint released showing that the vaccine for ages 5 to 11 is less effective than we hoped over time. And I think that needs to play an important consideration in part of this discussion. So when we're thinking about access for our pre-K students and them not having access, I think that our health advisors need to also take into account the fact that the science is emerging and evolving, and perhaps the vaccination, even if we have a high vaccination rate, perhaps it doesn't mean the same thing today as it did last week. The other thing is we can always have a variant evolve where it's very vaccine evasive, and that can change the calculus too. So just a certain number isn't always going to be as effective, which is, it's just it's always going to be a challenge, and it's always a bit of a judgment call. And I think that when it comes to, we do need a long-term strategy. We need to think about lifting these mitigation measures, and we need a really thoughtful process to do that, to help build confidence. But I also think that we can do that when case counts of COVID in our community are so low that we know that we don't have a high risk. So we know that we have really low amounts of the viral activity. don't expect to have it in our school buildings. And I think those are those opportunities for that level 1 and level 2, that Ms. Campbell was talking about, that Dr. Zoik was talking about, that will allow us to start to figure out how to operate in that space. So I think these are all really good points. Let's see. So I really stress like that we want transmission to be so low in our community that we're not expecting it to be an issue in the school, because we don't want, when we're thinking about operating our schools, it's not enough to just have low hospitalization rates or something like that. If we have too many cases, that's when operating a school becomes difficult. So we need those cases to be really low. And then finally, when it comes to drama and sports, my preference is that we have one recommendation and one change. So if we're not changing until at least March 14th or further on when the metrics say that it's a good time, then I think that we should keep the mandate for now. However, if we think about changing that, I would ask that perhaps we have rapid testing done right before a game or right before the productions, so that we have an additional layer that can, maybe take the place of removing the masks. I do get the sense that that is something the committee is thinking about adopting.
Thanks, Dr. Pangala. Ms. Campbell?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple in response to Dr. Pangala's points. I wanted to clarify first, I want to be able to authorize health experts just within the bounds of what we as a school committee feel comfortable with in terms of our overall vision for the health and welfare of our students. I just feel like that's a really important component because again, the metrics as written are a bit subjective, and I understand that they were intended to be written that way, but especially when you're considering equitable access to vaccines, equitable access to masks, how I define that may be very different from how even a medical professional defines them. And that difference isn't a difference of medical opinion, that's a difference of belief system in terms of what students and families need and deserve access to, and staff. So for those types of things, I think it's really important for us to have more of a shared and common definition. And in regards to the specific thresholds, I don't think it's important to have those numbers like spelled out, because as you say, obviously those have changed quite a bit. And every time we get a different variant, it does change what we are and aren't comfortable with. But rather, even a short snippet, like almost exactly what you said, like, in terms of case count, like where the case count is so low within the community that we don't have significant concern of community spread, even something like that, so that we can all say, yes, when the health experts feel like we've reached this point, description here, we are comfortable with X, Y, Z, and that's what triggers it. I think that that's just really important for us as the elected officials in conjunction with our health ex partners to kind of arrive at a shared definition. And then I would feel more comfortable empowering somebody to make the recommendation to the superintendent, because again, if they're making a recommendation and we're authorizing the superintendent to do it, they're still only making a recommendation regardless of what we've authorized them to do. It's only a recommendation, but in this case, the recommendation is going to the superintendent rather than the school committee. So it's still not, the decision still isn't being made by a healthcare professional. Steve, obviously, Dr. Zoik is incredibly knowledgeable and has learned so much about COVID, but in my mind, if you're going to authorize somebody to make a recommendation, it doesn't matter whether it's coming to the school committee or the superintendent, it's still a recommendation. I would just feel more comfortable in the authorization to the superintendent to make the determination or to adopt it, that we've already built out a list of parameters rather than the less specific metrics. And I'd also feel more confident in terms of the availability of vaccines. Hold on, I want to pull up the specific language. It's listed as equitable access to and level of vaccination rates in the schools. And I feel strongly that those need to be split into two because those are two separate considerations. And that's something that, the SPS health advisors are really going to have to wrestle with in terms of what if you have equitable access, but not high vaccination rates? Or what if the flip is true, you have high vaccination rates, but not for everyone? To me, those are two very different metrics, and I think they should be considered as such. And then again, the last thing I'm going to flag is that I don't think it's possible to have a pre-K plan. This is more in response to Ms. Manning. I don't think it's possible to have a pre-K plan and a K-12 plan. Our pre-K classrooms, our 3 and 4-year-olds are part and parcel of a school community. They share hallways and lunchrooms and things like that. So I think the decision, from my perspective anyways, as someone who spent a lot of time in elementary schools with little learners, it has to be made as a school community, because otherwise you're kind of defeating the purpose of it.
Mr. Cruz first, and Ms. Manning, I guess I want to be clear. We have 2 charges tonight, I think, around this mask issue. One is a general mask policy in schools that will be incorporating pre-K as well, trying to understand whether it's bifurcated or not, due respect to the comments that were just offered. That's what we want to talk about or understand better this evening. And 2 is this more immediate issue relative to athletics and performances. And do we want to have a carve out, so to speak? So we've heard from a number of us at least once or twice. Mr. Cruz, I'll call on you. Then I saw Mr. Fleming, Ms. Manning's hand, and then Mr. Fleming's. But Ms. Manning, I'm going to call on Ms. I'm sorry, Ms. Cornell's hand is up. Your hand kind of looks a lot like your background, so I apologize.
I noticed that.
Right. I'll go ahead and take Mr. Cruz's comments, and I want to hear from people we haven't heard from already. Okay.
I'm just going to be brief here, Mayor. I do want to point to the fact that I share similar concerns to Campbell regarding the advisory committee, only given that it's tied to some of the decision-making that we make here as a committee. And we have a pretty specific policy with respect to advisory committees and where those recommendations need to go, which is to ultimately come back here. So, not to make this process any messier than it needs to be, but I think that to align with the policy that we currently have around these types of advisory committees and the fact that we have been making the decisions around this, I want to formalize the role of these folks, but at the same time, the buck does stop with us, and these are recommendations that are coming from an advisory group, not a decision-making group in that sense. So I do think that the group, just in terms of the reporting, it needs to be aligned with what our policies say about this type of recommendation from like a task force or an advisory committee. So I do think it does need to come back to us, just so that way all members of the public and the committee have equal access to the information and the decision-making.
Thanks, Mr. Cruz. Ms. Cornell, and then Mr. Fleming.
I also agree with Amanda in that I don't want us to get so boxed in with the details that it prevents the committee, the Health Advisory Committee, from being nimble. But I would like to see that a little bit more fleshed out so that when, decisions are being made, we're really clear about what those parameters are so that we can communicate it out to families who might be reaching out to us. I'm very happy to authorize an advisory committee it's been wonderful to have their advice. And I also agree with the fact that I think that, we still need to be able to say that we've put our stamp of approval on the decision. But I don't know how that happens and how we can do that. I'll be nimble with that as well, right? If we need to make a decision really quickly, like sort of how we get together and vote on that. Maybe that speaks to the procedural stuff that Manny's talking about. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I also agree with a lot of the parents who have called in and wrote us some really thoughtful emails that at the very least, the waiting this sort of 2-week period after the break to go with a mask optional policy, I think makes sense, just that we can see where all of our families are. I would like some more detail on the social emotional prep that can happen in schools, how we have conversations among students and staff about how to be empathetic, how to support folks who are going to be wearing masks, as somebody else brought up, being supportive of people who decide not to wear masks. This is a short timeline if it is 2 weeks. So how do we incorporate that into our social emotional learning? I'd just like to know what that looks like. I also am curious about supports for the nursing staff. I mean, as soon as we don't have any masks on, we're going to see an uptick in cold and flu. And so, you know, I don't know about all of you, but every time I cough or sneeze near another human, I like feel like I need to like deeply apologize. And so what's going to happen if we've got our kids, you know, coming in and they've got a cough or they're sneezing a little bit and, you know, what is the protocol now? Because today, if you're sneezing and coughing, you stay home. You know, at what point do we get into a more normalized, you know, culture where people sneeze, they cough, and they don't leave the classroom? Are we going to rely on rapid testing? But I'd like to sort of be able to think about that. And then the very last thing is for athletics. I agree with Mary and Kristen. I like the idea of allowing the students to take their masks off. We know they're all vaccinated. And I also like the idea of giving them a rapid test before those games. But I also would be in favor of, until we have a broader policy on mask optional, I'd like to require the fans and spectators to wear masks. I think that's all I have.
Thanks, Ms. Cornell. Mr. Fleming?
In terms of the athletics, I would agree with Ms. Manning that while they were on the floor competing or on the stage playing a role, I don't think that they need to have the mask on. I think that the mask should come off and go back on when they're off stage or not competing. In terms of the levels, none of the 4 levels talk about distance between people. And Ms. Cornell just raised the question relative to sneezing, but I think there should be some level of distance continued by the district as to distance between people. Doesn't have to be 6 feet, but it should be something in the order of 3 feet. I think that finally that I would not support handing off the decision-making to anybody. I'm not saying the superintendent or anybody else, anybody. We're going to be blamed one way or the other. And I would not support a motion that hands off that decision-making authority to anybody but ourselves, the Salem School Committee.
Thanks, Mr. Fleming. Other comments? Ms. Manning?
Yeah, a couple of things. I would agree with Kristen. I think it's a good idea, the rapid testing piece that she added to what I was saying. I think as far as the social emotional learning piece that a couple of folks have mentioned, I just think we need to be very sure that we really do that both ways, because if we're only working, we have a short amount of time, but if we're only working in schools to work on not bullying people wearing masks, then we're really setting them up that they are being weird and different because they're wearing masks. You know what I'm saying? If we spend our time saying, don't be mean to those people because they're wearing masks, then clearly the message is because they're wearing masks, so we have to watch that you not be mean to them. It's got to be a two-way street. We got to be just saying, don't be mean to anybody either direction, whether they're wearing a mask or not. Everybody be nice both ways, because if you focus on one, you set that one up as special right off the bat. The pre-K thing and the ECC, I still think we need a separate thing. I understand a little bit of what Amanda is saying, and only because I understand with, kids in general, the whole sense of community thing is huge. But I think if it's comes down to an unvaccinated 4-year-old who's, compromised in some way, I know somebody said, only 2 people responded. Well, I didn't respond to everybody that didn't email me, but I certainly read them all. And the drift that I'm getting from people, and I totally share it, is that the concern is that the child not get sick. And if that means that you make different arrangements for where the eat. If they're not eating in the lunchroom with everybody else, you do something else. You make it fun somewhere else or whatever. You can work around those things, but you can't work around if a kid that's immunocompromised catches COVID and gets very, very sick or God forbid, something worse. So I would still push for a different, set of mitigations for the little guys. And then last is just a question. Do we need to vote on the advisor? What we would need, we have the people that have been advising all along, so we don't, I guess, vote on that group. What we do vote, it sounds like, on whether or not what the steps going to be that they're going to take, that how we're going to make our decisions, or are they going to make our decisions?
Right.
So that's what we, so is that like we should do that? Should we get, take that on first? And because that would sort of then some bearing, I would think, on then would we then go on tonight and vote on what our plan would be? Or if we vote that they're going to make a plan, then we don't have a second vote to take, maybe. I don't know. You see what I'm saying?
Yep, I do. I think what I'm picking up from the committee is a desire. Let me just say, I guess, a couple of things. One, at our last meeting, we said we are going to leave the mask requirement in place for 2 weeks after the start of vacation, coming back from vacation, because we've seen spikes in cases traditionally happen when we follow school vacation week. So the expectation is masks are going to be in place at least until March 14th. What the superintendent is suggesting this evening is that the health advisors that we've been working with throughout this entire pandemic provide formal recommendations to him based on a set of metrics. And I think what we're hearing from folks is, yeah, we want to be in the decision-making pool around whether we're going to change a policy or implement a policy. We like these health advisors. Perhaps that needs to come back to us. And we do have a meeting on the 7th, so that certainly can happen. But I guess I just want to be clear on what else I'm hearing. Masks are in place until the 14th, because we talked about that at the last meeting coming back from vacation. That folks are clear that we really don't want to pick a date on a calendar. We want to be driven by metrics, as we have been throughout this entire pandemic. We talked about a number of metrics that we would like to use: cases per week in our school, what our community positivity rates are and case rates are, what our wastewater looks like, and equitable access to vaccinations and masks. There may be others, but those are the key ones we talked about so far. Looking at those metrics, by the way, I think it's very clear to say that by mid-March, assuming things continue in the direction they are, we're going to be in a position where we can be mask optional in our district. But I do think it's important that we carve out a space that says we're not picking a date on a calendar. We're looking at metrics to help drive when that decision can be made. And 3, that we want to be the group that's hearing that recommendation back and making it. And I guess the 4th piece is a separate from that. What do we want to do around performances and athletics? And what I'm hearing are there's some, at least what folks have talked about so far, that masks when competing or performing could be optional at this point, provided we have rapid test requirements. And obviously we're already vaccinating our students. And if there's some consistency around that, we should vote on that this evening, given that we have contests and activities taking place prior to our next meeting on March 7th. Has that encapsulated a lot of it? I know there's some pre-K versus regular school year, but if we have a health advisory group, we could certainly hear back from them. I saw Ms. Cornell's hand, then Mr. Cruz's hand, then Ms. Manning's hand, then Dr. Pangala's hand. So clearly I have not summed up well. Ms. Cornell.
I thought you summed it up well. When I'm looking at the levels again, what exactly, I hear where everybody is coming from, and I mostly agree on the fact that we are the ones who make these important decisions, and people are going to see it as our decision. But when you get into the sort of granular details of what each level entails, and I'm obviously new, but I mean, suspending or reducing in-person meetings, right, which is level 4 mitigation. That's something that happened right when Omicron happened, but that's not something the school committee voted on, right? That was an action that the schools took, right, at the executive level. And eating outside, maybe that's something you all voted on before I got here, or was it? So that's something that was voted on. Okay. And then let's see, the surveillance testing, is that something you all voted on?
That's
Okay.
underway and we've been doing it. And there have been instances throughout this pandemic where we voted on those things or they were put in place as part of an overall operation to combat COVID.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is if we're moving from level 1 to level 2, level 2 to level 1, is that something that we all really need to weigh in on? Or is it some of the more serious decisions like going from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4? So I guess, maybe it's just too much. We just have to have an across the board thing where, whatever the recommendations are, Dr. Zweig brings them to us. But, I think if we have a little bit more of those parameters fleshed out, I'm not sure that I feel like I need to sign off on a switch from level 1 to 2 or 2 back down to 1. But I don't know if folks disagree with that.
Maybe rather than getting granular into what those levels are and what the right metrics are, a lot of what was presented tonight, I think, was the information and process that was used in the back of the house, so to speak, that led to a recommendation that came to the school committee throughout this pandemic, right? That informal group's been meeting, they've been looking at metrics. We've been learning our way through this pandemic. Dr. Pangalo's been a big piece of that, along with other experts that we've been bringing into bear. And it's in our best interest to sort of continue to follow that model and have the health advisory group provide information to Dr. Zweig, and he makes a recommendation to our group, because the level of granularity we're having in this conversation is frankly deeper than what we've had before. In many instances, a lot of that took place during the health advisory commission with people who really dug down, looked at the data, understood this is left, this is right, what makes sense, what's a truer compass for us to follow, what should we be navigating. And I am hesitant to get us as a group involved in that level of dialogue, because I think it will not be helpful, to be honest. And there are a group of experts that parlayed their expertise and the data and brought back a recommendation that we then understood. But to suggest that we're going to be determining the metric for what's equitable access or for wastewater surveillance data, like that may be, in my estimation, not worthy of our time, as much as it is the health advisor that's been together making recommendations. And these aren't anonymous people. They're folks in our district, they're stakeholders, obviously, and are working to ensure that we're being mindful of the lens that everybody brings to this. It's very different if you have an immunocompromised child at home or family member. Everyone's circumstances when you're managing risk is different. So is that helpful at all, Ms. Cornell?
Yeah, I don't want to be making those decisions either. So maybe I misrepresented what the sort of question that I had is, but like, yeah, I'm happy to have these experts come and tell us, this is sort of how we're making these decisions. So
yeah, I think you heard it correctly. I'm just trying to, in light of this conversation that we're having, the fact that it operated informally and then you got presented a menu, right? Was maybe easier than trying to decide what we should put in the ingredients as a group, if that makes sense. Other hands I saw, I called out the order before, guys, but you're gonna have to, I don't
think I was up next, Mayor Driscoll. I think the piece that I'll add here is when we set these policies back in August, one of the recommendations was around this type of check-in with this group of advisors, with the superintendent, and the recommendations would be brought back to us. I sent a copy of the policy that I was referring to the superintendent. I hope he'll share it with the members, but it clearly notes that the school committee has certain legal responsibilities and we cannot delegate and surrender those to others. And the recommendations from an advisory group that we establish has to be submitted back to this committee. So the decision has to fall with us. So I think that point is settled, and we don't have to rehash that any further. The mechanisms by which we make those decisions, we have plenty of options between special meetings and our regular school committee calendar. And given that the superintendent is going to call these folks on a quarterly basis and or as needed, as he needs to make these decisions, there's going to be plenty of intervals in which we can coordinate with the superintendent when a decision needs to be made. So I just wanted to clarify, the policy is pretty clear. I think we can put that other piece to bed and then make decisions around some of the other pieces. And there's certain pieces that I don't think we're going to be able to clarify today, because again, we have to talk with those folks that we've appointed to the committee to make some decisions, to make some recommendations, not necessarily decisions, and bring them back to us.
Thank you. Ms. Manning, and then Dr. Pangallo, I thought you had your hand up earlier. Am I right about that? Yeah. Okay.
I was going to respond similar to Manny, to Beth Ann. It's with me. I mean, it's not about this. I don't want to make decisions on specific granules of this, to be very honest. But if I look at it, and at first, when I thought about this, at first I thought, sort of like, whew, they're going to like make these, decisions, and it will go to Steve. But the more I thought about it, I thought, but that's not why I'm here. And it could be, it doesn't have to be about COVID. It could be about, I don't know, what kind of dog to get, or how to feed your goldfish. The topic isn't important. Could be something I know a whole lot about. It also, this happens to be something I don't know a lot about. All of that aside, it's the process that I'm trying to protect. It's just our right, it's our responsibility to make these decisions. So that's where I'm coming from on that. Not to be saying that I don't really, really, really appreciate all the work these people are doing, and please keep doing it. My other, if it would move things along to take one thing at least off the table, I am willing to make a vote. I make a motion at this point that we suspend the requirement for the boys basketball team and the 2 drama clubs, both at the middle school and the high school, to follow the mask mandate while they are actively participating in those events, until we change, make further change, with the understanding that there would be rapid testing involved prior to their participation. And that if they're not an active participant, they would have the mask on.
Clarification.
Yep.
One minute, Ms. Manning. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Fleming, did you have a clarification on that? Because Dr. Pangallo has her hand up, so I'm not going to take that motion up until we hear from Dr. Pangallo, but.
Yep. Clarification on the motion. Is the motion to say that basketball participation would be taking their mask off, and drama would take a mask off while performing?
Only performing.
Okay, I didn't get that. That's fine.
Yep, no.
Thank you, Mayor.
Dr. Pangallo?
Yeah, on the note about the performing, I do think having rapid testing in place would be helpful. I am concerned about, let's say a student signed up for to be in the drama club production that's going up this coming weekend, and they signed up assuming that everybody would be wearing masks, and now all of a sudden that's gone. And I feel like that's potentially putting some of our students in a really uncomfortable and potentially, not in their best interests. So I would prefer to keep it as is for the time being. They signed up for the theater productions and the basketball team and the other sports, knowing there was a mask mandate in place. And I feel like we should see that through to the end, because that was the agreement that everyone came into this with. I understand that sometimes things change, but I don't think that there's a reason to change it just yet. That's my opinion on that. When it comes to this discussion around whether the health advisory should report back to the school committee, I think that I can really see both sides of this. And I think that everyone has raised some really good points. I concur with all the points brought up about the granularity, and I think we're seeing some of that tonight. But one thing I really want to point out is, regardless of how this shakes out and how we end up creating this process, it is our responsibility as a school committee to absolutely ensure access to vaccines, access to masks, regardless of who this where this committee reports. And specifically to Ms. Campbell's point, it's not even enough about access to vaccines, it's about ensuring vaccination. And we really haven't succeeded at that yet. And we, entirely separate from the discussion asking, is we need to really keep the pressure, not the pressure, but we need to keep the emphasis on ensuring vaccination throughout our community. That's going to make the most important difference for the next surge, because there will be another surge inevitably, hopefully not as bad as Omicron, but it will in all probability occur at some point. So I think that we just want to keep that in mind, that this is, these things are all important, but we can do all of them, I think.
Thanks, Dr. Pingle. So to be clear, yes, just to summarize, we have two issues before us this evening we're hoping to work on. One is the general mask policies in schools, and that would incorporate pre-K because they are a part of our schools, so that we would get a recommendation back from a health advisory committee that's based on metrics, some of which were spelled out. We do have a meeting on the 7th. We certainly could take it up at that point. And I just want to be clear with the metrics we're seeing in our community, which, hooray, are going in the right direction. It would put us in a position, if all things stay the way they are, that by mid-March, we'd be looking at having a mask optional policy in place. That would also give us time to work in our schools, to talk about both empathy and how we're going to treat folks who make different choices, whether that's to mask up or do not wear a mask, as some folks have pointed out. That's not a guarantee, because I think our committee has said, we're not looking at a date in a calendar and throwing a dart and saying, that's it, we're sick and tired of masks, so that's the date. It's really going to be based on what is happening in our school community and in our larger community. And thankfully, at least right now, the metrics are going the right way. Let's hope they keep going the right way, and we'll all feel better about the decision we're making. There's no perfect. We're trying to do the best thing we can to keep as many people safe and healthy within our school district. So that being said, it feels like we're going to ask our superintendent to provide us with a more formal recommendation from this health advisory at our meeting on the 7th, because we know that masks are in place for at least 2 weeks based on what we said at our last meeting, 2 weeks after vacation, with the understanding of what we think will be in place at that time. Now, the 7th is not the 14th, it's not the 21st, but we'll look at that data set to give us some recommendations. Are folks comfortable with that? I'm not trying to kick the can down the road, but I don't think that health advisory has given recommendations right now, but I think they could be in a position to do so by the 7th. And that would essentially be operating the way we've been operating. We've got a group of stakeholders, some public health experts who provide recommendations to the superintendent, who then presents a policy change or shift or something new to our board for approval.
But we do have a motion on the floor, right?
I did not accept your motion, Ms. Manning, because I wanted to hear from Dr. Pangallo. So I will be happy to take up your motion at the appropriate time.
Okay.
I just want to, you're talking about the athletics and the performances, which actually seems easier to me than this conversation related to the general mask policy. Which essentially mean, I don't think we need a motion at this time, but we do have an understanding that we're going to use metrics. Metrics are looking pretty good right now to put us in a position to be mask optional by mid-March, but we'll get a more formal recommendation from the health advisors on the 7th. Is that a fair way to sum it up, Ms. Manning?
Could we ask that the advisory committee look at that pre-K?
Yeah, yep, that's incorporated in there. Yep, I said that earlier.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. So I'm going to set that aside because I don't think we need a motion. Dr. Reich, are you squared away in your mind how this could work for the 7th?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to play it back, you're asking us to be ready to share the recommendation of the health advisors at the March 7th meeting, which is a week from tonight.
Correct.
Okay.
That in essence is following kind of what we have been doing. It doesn't necessarily trigger levels and that discussion that we had earlier, but it certainly sets the stage for how we want to frame the issues that we're going to be looking at. And why I think that's really important, and I'm glad we went through that, is because this virus is not a switch that we turn on and turn off, right? Things could toggle back or forth. We might feel really good about removing mask requirements or going mask optional in March. And if something, starts to trend the other way and we start to see case counts going up, we may need to toggle back into a set of circumstances where we are applying additional measures to protect students and staff health. But rather than it just be tied to a date, having it tied to some metrics, I think ensures that we're thinking about that throughout this, whatever is left of this pandemic. So I'm going to put that in the box that I think we're in agreement with respect to getting recommendations on metrics, which are looking pretty favorable right now. The second question that we have is the concept of masks for athletics and performances. Ms. Manning, would you like to make your motion?
Yeah, I move that we suspend the mandate for wearing of the mask for students who are actively involved in participation on the floor or on the stage of the boys basketball team in the playoffs and the 2 drama clubs at the middle school and the high school.
I think we should say for any of those performances that might be happening between, because maybe other things that we just don't know about, right?
Thinking of athletics, I'm only thinking of athletic participation and drama because I don't think there's anything.
Well, there'll be a music concert at the end of the month. There'll be other.
Yeah, but we will have, I'm just looking at in the next 2 weeks.
There also is a music, I believe there's a music performance also next week as well.
Okay, all right, so any of the performing, I'll amend that to say any of the performing arts that are the same thing I just said, except include performing arts instead of just the 2 drama clubs.
I'm just so I'm clear. You're saying only for 2 weeks, Ms. Manning? You don't want this to be a policy going forward? You're just saying for the next 2 weeks?
Well, I was just saying that under the assumption that we were going to be making some type of a change in the foreseeable future. But I mean, because I want to phrase it so that if there were an uptick and we turned out we're not going to change the requirement, the mandate. I don't want these groups to have free range for the rest of the year if things turn bad suddenly. That there was sort of a time frame within it. I don't know if bigger brains can figure out a way to say that so that until we make a change that this exemption applies.
Dr.
I'm not
Pangala?
sure.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Just Mr. Fleming, did you second that?
I second it. I'm sorry.
Sorry, under discussion, Dr. Pangala.
I'd like to limit it to just if you're talking about the performances and the games, I think applying it to the music concerts, the band is much larger. That's a lot more people and that's a lot more risk. And I don't think we should do that. They've been playing beautifully, wearing masks throughout this year. So I think we can continue on with what we're doing there.
Thank you, Dr. Pangala. Ms. Cornell.
I'd like to add to Mary's motion the rapid tests for students.
Oh, I'm sorry,
before
I
the-
thought I included that.
Yeah,
I did.
but I do have a question about this. When other teams come for athletics, if the basketball team is whoever's coming to play the basketball team, the rules will apply to them as well. Can we ask? Is that what the MIA has said? So if those students aren't masked, can we ask them to take rapid tests?
I think we got to check.
Dr.
Oh, I'm
Strikis,
sorry.
I believe the home team's rules apply.
I'd have to double check. It is the home team's policies. So I suppose
It
if
has been, but hasn't the MIAA made a change?
I think
So-
Haven't they updated?
Okay, hang on, excuse me. Let's let Dr. Reich answer and then we can.
Yeah, So we have to the way the MIA wrote it, the guidance is that it's the home team's policies that would go into effect. So if required masks for the athletes and spectators, people have to follow suit. I'm not sure about testing, rapid testing. I can look into that. I don't see why not if we provide the tests to them, but I'd have to, before I say something that we can't do, I'll have to look into that.
Agree.
Okay, Ms. Banks, I see your hand up.
Yeah, our acts are also all required and our performers are all required to have consent. And so I do think that there could be an obstacle to implementing that as far as we don't know that any other district has consent. So it could be optional rapid testing, but I think the MIA specifies about the mask policy. I don't know if that can be attached to testing, and we don't have the ability to require consent for other districts.
Okay, so what we have is Ms. Manning, do you have something else to add?
Well, I was gonna ask Chelsea, I guess, do we have the latest on the MIAA requirements? Because I heard they were looking into dropping that now that they, now that the rules have changed and from Baker, et cetera, I've heard we're possibly looking into dropping that for tournament play. Or for any play now, from now on.
Yeah, no, this Mary, or Miss Manning, it is important to note that, read this directly, I have it right here. It is important to note that if the home school has a mask requirement for student athletes and fans, then the expectation requirement is that the visiting school comply with that requirement. If the home school does not have a mask requirement, the masking will be optional. That's the guidance. This is February 28th, 2022.
Okay.
The mask wearing protocols will end. Moving forward, as we navigate the winter statewide tournament, we will adhere to host school and venue specific restrictions.
Okay, all right.
That's effective today.
Thank you.
We have a motion that's before us made by Ms. Manning and seconded by Mr. Fleming. Under discussion, Ms. Campbell.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. I had a question for Dr. Pangello, who had maybe mentioned not wanting to add in additional performances. But I'm wondering, I mean, in terms of size, is the drama club performance significantly larger or smaller than, like, I know it's getting a little granular, but if we're going to exclude some, I'd like there to be a reason behind it, rather than just saying, well, not those ones. Like, is a drama performance is typically quite large with an ensemble cast, and in addition to the soloists who are on stage, the dance, like all of that stuff, it's a big performance. So I just wanted to raise that.
I think we should keep the masks on for the drama club as well. I think with the drama club, though, those performances, you may have one or I think it's a little bit smaller in scale than the band, but I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure the numbers there in terms of who's actively performing at one time. Risk is tough and it's cumulative over time. So,
Ms. Manning?
Could I just go back to my original motion for the 2 drama performances and the basketball team? Because I think the bands can play. And also the band's going to play again. They're going to be a spring concert. It's going to be an end of the year, whatever. The drama club is a one-shot deal for these kids. And the basketball team hopefully won't be a one-shot deal, but it could be. But there's more band in the future this year. So I would just, if I can, just go back to my original motion of the 2 clubs and the basketball.
Motion made by Ms. Manning that we reduce the mask requirement for sports and for drama, with the requirement that there be rapid tests for participants and that the masks would only be dropped when students are competing or performing.
It's not sports. It's just the basketball team in the playoffs.
Just the basketball team in the playoffs. So if there are other sports that are performing, they're going to be required to wear masks. I mean, at some point, we need to pick a lane that we're going to go down and understand that it's going to be a consistent policy. We're saying yes to drama, no for music, only for basketball,
Well,
not
these are
sports.
the one-shot deals. That's why I'm saying it that way.
But we're putting forth a policy that is saying we no longer are going to require masks for students' activities that were respiratory. We didn't take these up separately. We adopted them as a group, as a whole, for what they were, and required masks because we thought they were things that required that at the time. And I think we should be consistent if we're going to drop them with following this consistent policy as well. And we're talking about pulling them back, providing rapid tests. We know those students are also required to be vaccinated. We've got it to a place where we feel comfortable as a whole but I also am concerned about when we pick and choose, what makes the most sense.
I guess I'm looking at it that, I mean, the next round of sports is just getting going. They're not gonna be in competitions yet. Because the tournaments of the winter sports are still going on. So the spring sports, if they're even started, they don't have many games yet. And drama will be over. I'm coming at it from the approach that by the time these other things that you're talking about are gonna start happening, either we're gonna be in a mess that everybody's back in them, or we will have taken that, rescinded it. That's just the way I'm thinking. People can vote. I mean.
Yep, thank you, Ms. Manning. I saw Mr. Fleming's hand and then Cruz, I think, hand.
Chelsea raised a problem, and I think that it's all right for us to have our own people. I don't think we can have the other team or other players tested.
That's accurate, Mr. Fleming. I didn't mean to report it that way. It would only be our students who were getting tested.
And that's all I meant, was our own.
Mr. Cruz and then Ms. Cornell.
Yeah, so I do want to just reiterate your point, Mayor, regarding the policy recommendation. I think we have to be narrow in terms of, or we have to avoid getting super granular. I think narrowing it down to an activity is not the right way to go here. We're going to get recommendations from a group that we've just advised. They can come back to us with further recommendations or clarifications, but I think it's high respiratory activities, and we can parcel it out to limit it to drama performances while they're performing and sports activities while they're performing. And again, this group is going to come back to us with further recommendations, and we may adjust. But I do think it's for that category of students. It's not to get down to the level of this particular event.
Ms. Cornell and then Dr. Pangala.
I was just wondering if we could change the language of the motion to say students actively participating in athletics, theater, or music performances can be mask optional, and when they're not actively performing, like if you are not blowing a horn, if you are not out on the basketball court, your mask is on. As soon as you go to the bench, your mask is on. As soon as you're off stage, your mask is on.
No, because
hang on, Ms. Manning. Let me get Dr. Pangala first. Her hand was raised.
I concur with the point about not picking and choosing. I think I come down on the opposite side of it. I don't think we should change anything yet because we haven't made that change. And also wanting to point out that, we are still in a point of substantial transmission in Salem. This is the average daily cases for Salem for 100,000 people over the course of this past month. And these are the thresholds as defined by the CDC. So we're still in this area of substantial transmission. It looks low only because we were in such crazy high transmission for so long. And the other thing is we don't even have data from our testing for this week yet because we haven't even done it. So, I think voting to lift a mask requirement at this stage is very, very, it's too soon. I don't think we have the information. We're saying we're committed to metrics. We don't have the metrics. So I don't think we should do this now.
Good, that's
Other hands that I saw, Ms. Manning?
I just want to respond to Beth Ann. You're defining actively participating as being in the game. And if you're on a team and you're doing warm-ups and you're doing practices and you're in drama and you're in practices and stuff, that's actively participating. So I wouldn't change the phrase to actively participating. I'm only saying in the actual event as it's going on. But I'm also willing to pull the motion back until next week's meeting and see where the metrics that Kristen's talking about if they might change my mind or anybody's mind. So I'll wait and possibly put it back in again on Monday.
Mr. Fleming?
That affects both. You push the next Monday, you're ducking the question. I think I'm putting the basketball team in a great disadvantage. So I would not push it. Either we vote to allow it, either we vote to allow it or not allow it.
You're right. I forgot the game was Friday. All right. Well,
All right, so folks, I know I think you had a motion, Ms. Manning, unless you wanted to withdraw that. While we don't,
No, I'll keep it. No, I was forgetting the game was Friday. I'll keep it. Or I'll amend it to hold off on a drama decision. We don't need to make that decision tonight. And just make the decision on the game.
Well, there is a drama performance though, starting Friday night.
This weekend?
Yes.
Okay, then I leave them both. The motion stands.
yeah. So we have a motion before us to suspend masking for folks participating in sports and performing arts competitions, with a requirement for our folks that they get a rapid test beforehand, and that the masks will be required when on the bench and not actually performing. Is that correct, Ms. Manning?
It's not sports, it's in the basketball tournament.
Right, I'm sorry, basketball only. We're only doing basketball, and we're only doing drama performances.
Yep.
Under that motion. Is there a second to that, Mr. Fleming? That's the same motion you've already seconded? Any more discussion on this? All those in favor, I will call the roll. Ms. Manning?
Yep.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo?
No.
Ms. Cornell?
To be honest, I don't understand the motion. Are we doing just basketball and theater?
Just
Basketball and
basketball
theater.
tournament games and just the 2 drama clubs.
No.
Mr. Cruz?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
No.
Mayor Driscoll, yes. On a vote of 4-3, the matter carries. So we are, I think, completed with the mask conversations. One is that one conversation relative to masks in schools. We've just consistent with where we were before. Masks will be in place and required through March 14th. We're asking the superintendent to utilize metrics as we have relied on them in the past and bring back a recommendation for March 7th, at least based on the metrics as we're looking at them today. That would put us in a lead position to remove masks in mid-March, and we'll be prepared to vote on that on the 7th. So if there's additional data or information that we need, that you need as individuals, please work with Drs. Reich and Chelsea Banks to get that, to make them aware of what you might be looking for. It's pretty consistent with the way we've been operating. And like, the good news is these trends are going the right way. I know that we want to do everything we can to support our students and our staff. And I also think we want to be mindful of where we're at within the environment within our community. So looking forward to that discussion on the 7th. Drs. Reich, any additional report items for you? I know you've got.
I'll be very quick. I hesitate to put anything else out there, but the only thing I want the committee to consider is the calendar. And in your packet, you have a copy of proposed calendars for the upcoming school year. And as anything in Salem, we have, as you know, we have multiple calendars for different schools. And I did provide you in your packet a few different scenarios. Ann Berman mentioned in her comments the November break, versus a winter break. And I provided 3 options for consideration. One would be a pause in the schedule for right after Halloween. One, the second week of November, which already has multiple days off. And then the third would be extending the winter break. The version of the calendar I provided you was a traditional calendar, much like we have this school year. But I did want to put it on the table because this is one of the responsibilities of the school committee to vote the calendar. And so I want to make sure you have some time to review it, talk to constituents. And then I was hoping to vote on it next Monday, although it seems like our meeting next Monday will have much more to discuss than maybe we had initially planned, but it would be great if we could, finalize the calendar as soon as possible for families and staff who are planning for the future. So you do have that in your packet. I'm happy to take questions during the week if people have them regarding the proposal. And there looks like there's some questions now.
Mr. Cruz?
Dr. Wright, real quick, I just wanted to note that you listed out on the calendar some days that are not holidays in which school would be in session. The only things that I didn't list it on here were the election dates, which were set probably prior to or after you had come up with the calendar. So I think we would need to add that there is a preliminary election on the 6th and then of September, and then there is another one in November. And I think we should just note that on the calendar.
Okay, yeah, sure. You mean the 8th, the 8th mean, I think you mean November 8th, right? For the-
8th of November, yep.
And then,
Apologies.
and the preliminary, Manny, is
Number 6.
October.
September 6th, that's right.
September 6th, okay. I'll make sure we get that in there.
Dr.
Yeah,
Pangala?
That was one of my points as well. I think it looks like on some of them it's highlighted. Some of the election days might be on the November 1st on one of the calendars and on the 8th on another. So just, yeah, looking at that. The other thing is, so I just want to make sure I understand. So in the letter that you included for us on page 20, there was, it described the 3 options, and then you give the calendars for the different schools just with the typical calendar, and then we can just like figure it out from there based on, okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that.
That's right. I gave you what the traditional base calendar is
Right.
that we essentially had this year.
Yeah.
And you'd have to insert that, whatever the days are, into each of the different calendars if the committee voted to include. Although I think we'd have to go back to the individual, some of the school, trying to learn this, being, my second go around here with these calendars, is some of the schools do have the autonomy around their calendars. We would have to go back to them to see if they would include these holidays into these breaks into their calendars or not. And so, but, so we'll check with them.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Did I see any other hands, guys, that I missed? Okay. So that's just an item for our consideration that you're I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell, apologies.
Thanks. I just wanted to share that Dr. Drake had caught Kristen's note that on the elementary calendars, election day is listed at November 1st. I just didn't want that to get lost.
Yeah,
where it's
thank you.
Actually, yeah.
Which calendar was Campbell? Just
I think it was the main elementary schools in Carlton as well were all listed as November 1st, whereas New Liberty and Salem High School for sure had it on the correct day, November 8th.
Yeah, yep, I see that. Okay, got it. Thank you.
So that's for our consideration, and our expectation is we'll vote on that at the next meeting, Dr. Reich, on the 7th, or
Yeah, I was hoping to do that on the 7th so people could have ample notice.
you can get your feedback to Dr. Reich if you have, sort of strong feelings about one or the other, or for or against, so we can try and develop some consensus between now, and that would be helpful. Anything else, Dr. Reich?
No, I just that you have a personnel report as has been requested on a quarterly basis. So that's in your packet as well for this week.
Great, thank you. Moving on our agenda, we've already had our student representative report. I'm glad Awa went early because this would have been a long time for her to be waiting to make her report. I don't think we have any old business, but under new business, we have a deliberation and vote on the Salem High School ROTC overnight out-of-state field trip to Elizabeth, New Jersey. I think it's a physical fitness challenge they're doing. I'd entertain a motion at this time.
Move approval.
Motion made by Mr. Fleming to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cruz. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, I will call the roll.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand fast enough. We have the same things in place that we've had for prior field trips, vaccination requirement, testing before and after, all of that sort of thing.
That's good.
I'm sorry? Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't know if Mr. Fleming was saying something I couldn't hear.
That's a good addition to the motion.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, Dr. Pingalo, that would be my expectation.
It's a requirement for certainly for our out-of-state trips, for sure. Any other comments or questions? Not, I'm going to call the roll. All those in favor, Ms. Manning?
No.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Dr. Pingalo?
Yes.
Ms. Cornell?
Yes.
Mr. Cruz?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Driscoll? Yes. 6 members voting, 7 members voting, 6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. The matter carries. Next item is deliberation. Oh, I don't think we need this deliberation and vote on recommendations for masking in Salem Public Schools. As we just previously discussed for a good deal amount of time, we are going to ask the superintendent to come back to us with a recommendation based on the metrics from the Health Advisory Committee so we can vote on the 7th. But I do think it's fair to put on the table that based on the metrics we're looking at, certainly looks like we'll be in a position to be mask optional by mid-March, which I think is encouraging for those of us who are looking forward to positive trends. But we do want to hear directly, or we'll want to get the recommendation from our health advisors. So no action needed at this time. Finance and operations report. I'm not quite sure there was a finance and operations report in here at this, unless I missed it.
There is nothing to report.
Perfect. I am going to move forward then with our subcommittee reports. We've got our policies for second reading, 1103, 1105, and 1107. I'd entertain a motion at this time. Ms. Cornell?
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Cornell for second reading, seconded by Mr. Cruz. Any further discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor, Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
and Mayor Driscoll, yes. 7 voting, 7 affirmative, the matter carries. School committee concerns and resolutions, anything? new?
I have a building and grounds subcommittee.
Oh,
report.
thank you. Please, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you. The committee met today and considered 3 issues. Number 1 is we reviewed the capital projects request, and we forwarded that to the city as sent to us. We forwarded that to the city for further consideration. Then as the for the what was that one? I'll think of it. We also considered entering into an agreement for solar and Collins at the Salts and voted affirmatively that the committee should vote on that at our next meeting. Then we also considered the budget for the facilities and buildings and grounds, and we sent that to finance.
Right.
So there should be only one vote that was to send the entering the agreement for solar at Collins and Salts to the whole committee the next meeting.
Great. Do you want to, does that need a motion to be referred back, Mr. Fleming?
Yeah. Yes.
Motion made by Mr. Fleming to refer the solar agreement to the full committee. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cruz. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, Ms. Manning? Ms. Fleming?
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo?
Yes.
Ms. Cornell?
Yes.
Mr. Cruz?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Driscoll, yes. 7 members voting, 7 in the affirmative, the matter carries. Any other subcommittee reports before we move on? Seeing none, school committee concerns and resolutions? Any particular items that we haven't talked about today? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Fleming.
Move to adjourn.
Motion made by Mr. Fleming that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Yep.
Second.
Seconded by everybody. All those in favor, Ms. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Dr. Pangalo, Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Mr. Cruz,
Yes.
Ms. Campbell,
Yes.
Mayor Driscoll. Yes, we stand adjourned at 9:39 p.m. Okay, everyone, have a good rest of the night.
Night.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks.